started officially. I don't think the proper way to, Patrick, you can tell me I'm wrong. You don't really close the meeting. You say we're going to, in the meeting, in the regular meeting, you say we're going to vote to
Adjourn to
adjourn
executive.
to an executive session.
But we're actually not having it tonight. I'm going to announce that.
Oh, well, never mind. I didn't say a word.
No, you wouldn't have known.
No, I didn't.
So Robin Stein indicated that she would prefer a later date, so
Okay.
no problem.
Whatever.
So it's approximately 7:02 PM, and I am calling the April 4th, 2023 Planning Board meeting to order. The meeting is being recorded. At this time, I'll call roll, and so when I call your name, would you please indicate that you're present? Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, present.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Wheaton, present.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist, present.
Rick Mitchell,
Rick Mitchell, present.
Richard Boroff,
Richard Boroff, present.
and Pat Norton,
Present.
and Marnie Crouch, present.
And Beth Hare, present.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Beth Herr is present as well. So it's my understanding that this is Richard Boroff's last meeting.
I understand. Thank you.
And I want to thank you for all your service on the planning
thank you.
board, and I wish you the best of luck in whatever other endeavors you're going to undertake that doesn't involve meetings at 7 o'clock, that last 3 hours.
I don't mind the 7 o'clock. The 3 hours is a bit tough, and it's much better than having a meeting at 6 or 8 o'clock in the morning. So, thank
okay.
you.
All right, well, thank you, and good luck,
Yeah,
Richard.
thank you.
So we have a number of items on our agenda tonight, and I would like to just proceed expeditiously. So I want to report that Emil and Jonathan have been working really hard with their mapping endeavors and also coming up with some ideas for coding. So I want to turn the meeting over to them, and once we have analyzed their work product and discussed it, and if warranted, taking a vote or two, we will turn to a discussion of uses. And as you all may recall, Attorney John Whitten did indicate that the only uses that are prohibited are the ones that are not listed. So by listing uses, we are essentially permitting them. So we should have coherent and I think perhaps a little bit lengthy use of potential uses, because we don't want to inadvertently exclude something if a developer comes down the road with a use that would be perfect for the site, but we had inadvertently not listed it. So we'll undertake that exercise. And then in the memo that I think most of you may have received and some of you may not have received, I did include an outline of a draft overlay district that I have been playing with a little bit, but there are some concepts embedded in that, and I wanted to review them with you and see if you have any thoughts on them, whether you would want to adopt them or modify them in any way, shape, or form. So at this point, Emil, the floor is yours. Oh, and one more thing before I forget. The agenda indicates that we will be adjourning and going into executive session. We will not be going into executive session tonight. And then the final thing that we really do need to discuss is our timetable for completing our work. So, Emil.
Thank you, Marnie. Based on the last meeting when we were reviewing some of the one of the zoning, specifically the zoning map, there was a lot of discussion about being a little bit more specific about the information that's being anticipated. So, along with Jonathan, we've been working, or I've been working with coming up with a couple of plans that we'd like to review with you. And one of the things that's really critical, I think, at this structure or juncture is to come to the decision by a board as to which direction we're going to take with regard to the zoning map, because, because everything is really contingent on that, the overlay district, how the overlay district is prepared, and also especially how it's documented, or how specific it's going to be in terms of standards, for example. So the first item that we'd like to do is sort of go over the, or with you, go over the mapping of the site. Now, we did bring larger drawings that if we want to adjourn around a table, we can do that, or,
I have the electronic files that were in the emails. I can share that on the screen, too.
yeah, I don't know if there's a preference that the board has for gathering either around a table like we've done in the past, or just do it from
Well, I
the
think
tables.
for the public, you probably want to do it on the screen.
I would like.
We're going
that
to show what's
board,
on the
too.
screen anyway, yeah, on that.
So in other words, we can do both. We can show it on the screen and do it around a table if the board pleases.
No, I'd
No,
rather watch it on
no.
the screen.
Okay. So the only thing, Emil, that I would like to add is that it might be useful, and maybe, Pat, you can find this, is to find the sector plan that we voted as a point of departure at the last meeting, to have that available just as a launching point. So that's not in the slide deck. And I don't know whether that's something that you can find. I have a, this is the plan that we looked at
What's
last
the date on
meeting.
that one?
We voted on the year.
Yes, 3/21/23, it's called sector plan. And that might be useful to just
That's a good
have
start.
available. And basically, that sector plan took the, we'll call it the central campus, and just made it all one undifferentiated zone. And it included 4 of the dorms as well into all one undifferentiated zone. And the next step is to look at that and talk about that and
Right.
take it to the next step, which,
Why don't we start with that drawing then, Pat, if you
I
can?
just have the image of a picture, or is it in
No,
a
that's-
different email?
it should,
This is what it looks like.
it should be,
In the,
has have been submitted, you
just
know,
recently?
yeah. So Patrick, would you have an idea of what email it would be embedded in? That's what you're looking for.
Any board material for today?
it was at the 321 meeting.
Yeah, would have been within.
An
We
attachment
got
there?
those on 321.
Memo. I don't seem to have it in an email. Other than that picture of the plan. I don't have the file
Oh.
that says sector plan.
I mean,
Yeah, I didn't bring my
It's-
laptop, so.
I mean, it's not essential that we have it, but the difference between what we're going to be talking about tonight and that plan is that we're going to talk about, is the central district, the center campus, all one undifferentiated zone, or are there
Yeah.
more pieces to that?
Well, it looks like everybody does have a copy of that. If we could maybe start the conversation and
Yeah,
Right,
can
I
show
think
you.
all
And
the planning
then
board
put it up
members
on-
have a
put it up on
have
the
a
screen
copy.
for the public when we get it.
Sure, yeah, anyways.
So, Patrick, is there a chance that you can,
I just
that's
have
it, right,
this.
that's it right
That's
there?
it.
That's it.
Okay,
That's the best I got.
okay. Well, it's pretty simple.
Yeah. This is a scheme that reflected a lot of the preferences established by and agreed to by the board earlier. Things like the heritage landscape, the buffering around the perimeter, the idea of expanding the utility fields and so forth, and building on the most buildable part of the property, which is mostly in the central part and at the top of the hill. This scheme was overly simplified. You can see the existing roads shown in dark gray. You can see the red buildings that are the historic buildings. There are 4 of them. And then the darker gray or black buildings are existing buildings on the site that are to remain at this stage. The color differentiation, which you might not be able to see, but on the very top is Browns Hill. It's the reddish portion there with the two large buildings laid out. And then north is to the right. Bridge Street is to the right. Woodbury is straight down. And to the left is Essex Street on the orientation of the map. Between the very top at Browns Hill and the level bottom at the central development area is a sloped area that consists of the heritage landscape and steep slopes, which is heavily wooded. The brown part are the steep slopes that go down to to Bridge Street. And they have two functions there, or they contribute two aspects to the site. One is actually internal buffering. They're also quite steep. They're in excess of 20% slopes in a lot of areas. So they're quite steep and difficult to build on. Part of the steep slopes goes along Bridge to the intersection of Woodbury, and that really provides a fairly deep buffering for dormitories E and F, which are the two in the southeast corner of the site. And then so the green area is the heritage landscape, which is the area that we agreed as a board contributes the most to the visual interest, I guess, of the site from its historic, from landscape standpoint, and for preservation of not only the history, but of a very remarkable piece of property that many people have used as for recreation, walking, and so forth. The red buildings would be hopefully preserved, if at all possible. Those are records of the past, and they would be worthwhile to keep. They're very fitting for their positioning on the site, so hopefully that gets worked into a future development. But the central development area that's indicated right in the middle is the area identified where most of the new construction would take place, other than at the top of the hill. This is the area there that's fairly level, and the idea here is that you could work with the existing buildings, integrate them in a way that would make them better in a lot of respects, and then come up with a development, two or three different scenarios that could work in this situation at the bottom of the hill. The yellow areas, again, are utility expansion area. That's an unknown, how much they're going to grow in size as the use on the site increases. The two dormitories on the left to the bottom are A and B, and those are two dormitories that are relatively isolated, really, from the rest of the campus down a road. The natural area is mostly wetlands that is indicated there to the left of the development area. Again, this was introduced as a way to, how would you divide this site into segments that would be codified? And the purpose of this sector map, or which we're going to call really a zoning map, because that's what it is, it's to link the physical site to, in this case, an overlay district. In other words, the map is what defines the location for a specific code. So where you see these different sectors, different colors, each would be coded differently, slightly differently, depending on its function. For example, the heritage landscape would be kept mostly as open space, parks and recreation. The central development, again, can be developed fairly densely, compactly, in different ways. So that becomes really the primary building area there. But the discussion was, one of the difficulties in looking at a map like this, which shows a broad central development area, is there is no distinction there about what's actually going on the ground, on the site, as you experience the site, as you walk through it. The other thing is it sort of suggests that it's kind of one size fits all, that you do come up with one code and just spread it across a wide zone. And again, we've seen a couple of pictures during the course of some of the presentations in the past that have shown a development like Like it could be 55-plus housing just spread across the whole central part of the campus. And that's something I think that, at least from my standpoint, I hope we can avoid. Just sort of one thing fits every place. Distinctions are going to be subtle, they're going to be slight, but they are all important. And the one thing I do want to say about this project that strikes me is that this, as Dr. Barnes has made mention in many times before, is that this is a huge opportunity. And I think the opportunity partially, which really hasn't been talked about, is that there is no project here at this stage. So the opportunity is for the town to come up with something that it actually should be doing on this site, a project that really could benefit the town in many ways, which I won't go over those again, but based on the principles we came up with. And if the idea was to come up with a design that could be eventually an as-of-right development in the middle of this property, that if you follow this and build it according to the illustrative plan that was developed on this, that the planning board could really have a streamlined process toward an approval. That, because there is no project on the boards or on the table for discussion, is an opportunity this town doesn't have very often. And this is one I think we ought to take advantage of, because it, the as-of-right for a developer is a very important one. And I think whether Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary does the development or not in the future, that's an as-of-right on the site that would be really valuable. The other thing I'll say about this is one of the things that people are always concerned about is the unknown, and the unknown is what could be built, what could happen on this site. And again, the advantage of doing a project in advance where all the thinking is done at the beginning, not the end of the project in terms of whether it fits or not, is that the unknown is taken away, it becomes predictable. So that if you do something and vet it through the public process as to intensity, and if it's widely accepted, then it becomes predictable. You know what's going to happen on that site in the future. So there are a lot of benefits that really have not been brought out sufficiently, I think, in the course of discussions on this project, but they really all are worthwhile to think about. And then lastly, before we get to the next slide, or Jonathan, you may have something to say, what the planning board really wanted to do in coming up with this illustrative plan, beginning with this sector plan, is to get a sense of what intensity of development, and I'm not using the word density, but intensity, because it means mostly building sizes, locations, and configuration on the site. That's what I mean by intensity. Where does it get located? Where are all the tall buildings, the smaller buildings, the larger ones? Where are the spaces on the site? All of that becomes part of intensity. That has never been clear, so the planning board has been trying to come up with a couple of scenarios that could work in this situation in order to define what would be accepted by the population of the residents here, the abutters, rest of the population in Hamilton. What is that number? What is that build-out on this site that would be acceptable? And how much is too much on the site? So that's been one of the metrics that the planning board has been trying to look at here to get this board comfortable with a build-out of a particular size. And it could be square footage, it could be numbers of dwelling units and so forth, different metrics that we could use. And these are numbers we have at this point now, and we can go over these later.
I could just interject, and I think that it was something that I noted at town meeting, that the consultants have really given the planning board something of a springboard. But what they were never able to do at the workshops was actually get sufficient information from the public about what the public feels would be the right amount of intensity of development on the site. And I
To all this question, especially given that you're stating that the town should present ideas as to what they want, shouldn't very soon the town, meaning the Board of Selectmen or somebody like that, some organization like that, set up a committee to do exactly that kind of thing?
That's what we're doing right now tonight. we're doing it. The planning board is doing it, and I think about 3 meetings ago, Jonathan and Emil actually did do some preliminary drawings showing low-density development, medium-density development, and high-density development. And now they're refining those plans, showing different levels of density, but the maps show configurations that if we, as a board, agree, a developer could obtain as-of-right approval if they substantially followed the illustrative plans for
So,
the site.
Then the next question is, since this board is doing that work, is the Board of Selectmen given their blessing to our doing that work?
Well, we're charged with doing this work.
So it's
I mean, it's
essentially,
the
the answer
planning
is yes.
board's job to do this.
Pardon me?
It's the planning
Okay,
board's
that's
job to
fine.
do
I
this.
just check and make sure.
Yep, go ahead, Emil.
Yeah,
Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. Jonathan, you have?
I just wanted to clarify that there's, in a sense, 2 tracks here. One is to get to a sector plan that's we said that this plan was the jumping off point, the point of departure for a zoning map. To get to a zoning map that the board can accept if there is an application that doesn't follow the illustrative plan. So, and then the other thing is to marry that zoning map to make sure that it also doesn't conflict with if somebody comes in with a drawing that substantially follows the illustrative plan. So you're trying to marry a zoning map that does both, that's flexible, where the developer comes in with their own concept plan, they ignore the illustrative plan. You know, what's the zoning map they work off of? What are the metrics they work off? What are the areas they're working off of? And then to make sure that very same zoning map also works for the illustrative plan. So it's to marry those 2 interests and make them compatible and start coding.
Good.
Could I interject a little here, too?
Yeah.
I agree with Jonathan. We're at a kind of fork in the road. We've drawn, we actually took a vote on this zone map. And there's really 2 directions we can go from here. The first direction is to fill in as many details as possible so that we say you can do this as of right. And, you know, the theological seminary gets a little nervous the more we fill in the details because that restricts the developer. On the other hand, the developer gets to do it as of right.
Right.
The alternative is to basically say the only thing you can do by right, this is actually a big give by us to the theological seminary, is use the existing buildings you have for non-educational, commercial, residential use because they can't convert them without a change in zoning. So we're going to give you that by right, but everything else is a special permit. Now, we have lots of bylaws that allow clustering and all sorts of other development, and we require special permits. So rather than try and be very, very specific to the point where we're comfortable enough of saying you can do this by right, we can be very general, short, you know, we have to work within these zones, and we can say, you know, we would entertain, you know, a wide range of things in these zones, but we want to have this be a special permit, so we can review it. Now, the seminary will say, oh, if you impose a special permit, that's going to, you know, impede the sale. But on the other hand, we're also giving the developer a blank slate, or not a complete blank slate, but the point is the plan can be developed completely by the developer, knowing that they're going to have to go for a special permit.
Right.
And I'm not sure which one of those 2 paths we should take.
Well, here's the thing. In my memo, what I suggested was we have 3 paths. One is the illustrative plans, and and I say substantially because, you know, there's always a tweak. But if you follow the illustrative plans for the site, that's as of right development. If you reuse the existing buildings.
And do
That's-
nothing new.
And nothing new, you know, within a to-be-determined tweak. for elevators on the dormitories and that type of thing. If you reuse the existing building, that's as of right. But if you engage in new construction, well,
It
that.
doesn't exactly follow the illustrative plan.
Right, that diverges.
All of that is a special permit.
That would be a special permit. And as you may recall, John Witten did indicate that you can structure the special permit requirements and findings in a way that can make it easier or harder, and that's a discussion as well.
So I think the board is kind of in agreement with
Okay.
what was just said. What we just have to get to is, we said that this, that sector map was a point of departure. Now our goal is to get it beyond a point of departure and actually have the plan that we can vote on and accept and start coding on. That's the next step. And
Okay.
I would suggest we just do it.
Let's go.
Let's just do it.
Let's go.
So.
Emil,
Do what?
keep talking. We're now going to the next
We're going to
map.
go to today's
To get
business.
past point of departure to a plan that we actually say, this is the plan.
You mean
So that's the mission. Whether we'll get there is a question of a vote.
New Brown.
So Pat, do you have
Zoning map A?
number 2,
Of the material for, yeah, number 2?
Browns
Still
Hill
zoning
map
map
A? They were in sequence. The first one was, number 1 was the table of zones, which we'll come back to. Number 2 was,
This one here.
yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, that's the one.
All right, this, from that point of departure, this one, then primarily the distinction here, this shows again just existing roads in a light gray line or lines going through, looping through the site. And it shows the different sectors, but the particular difference that we need to talk about is that development area right in the center, the blue, the 3 blue areas, the light blue on the left, darker blue in the middle calls C-RC or R/C and NR. Those are 3 zones that we're using that are of concern in this discussion because they take the level of detail a step further than the previous sector map. And this one we're calling Map A. And we've also done some area takeoffs here. So we've identified each of the zones. Again, on the top, the BH-C/R is Browns Hill at the top of the hill. Moving down to the south, you have the Heritage Landscape, HL, the greenish area, that's 12.0 acres. Just to the upper corner in that area is the UE, which is utility expansion, anticipating that there might be a need there for wastewater treatment, which would be at some point converted back to a meadow, because it would all be underground. So that was just sort of kept aside as a potential expansion area. The part to the right there, NA, is a natural area, the greenish area, which is 10.0 acres. That, again, is mostly steep slopes and heavily wooded area. The road just below that NA is the road that goes out to Bridge Street. That's currently exit only going out there. And then you get just below that, there's a gatehouse at the exit right there, the red building. That's an older building. The NR, which is the northern residential area, which would include dorms E and F, plus additional development around them that would be multiplex housing. Going to the left, CR/C is the central area. Again, that's residential/commercial. The distinction is that that could be developed in 2 ways. It could be all residential, could be 55 plus, it could be multiplex housing, or exclusively residential, or it could contain something like an assisted living, senior services facility there, in the order of maybe 50,000 square feet, something of that size in there, or possibly another type of building to be determined. But
Emil, could I
yeah,
just interject for a moment, just to clarify, so folks are understanding where we're going? The fundamental difference here between the map you just were looking at, the sector map, and this map, as Emil mentioned, is the central campus area, instead of being one undifferentiated zone, is 3 zones. And what might be good is to talk about why would you do that? What would be the impulse behind that? Do you want to talk about that, or do you want to?
Yeah, I was just going to hit the other areas, and then we can come back and talk about why why was this broken up into 3 parts. But just briefly, to the left of the central area is what we call the stables, which was the original purpose of that red building, that historic building there. Stables, residential/commercial, with the idea being that would be a residential. That particular building would form kind of, would be part of an assemblage of buildings all oriented around that, in character with it, that could be created as a special feature on the site. Again, take advantage of something that's already existing there and turn it into something better. C and D are the 2 dormitories that exist. Those may stay long-term, or they may be taken down and replaced. Anything could happen there. So we wanted to include the dormitories, which we'll get back to again in a minute. And then all the way down to the bottom, the S-D, the South Development Area, dormitories A and B, which was 2.6 acres. The natural area just above that SD area is 28.3 acres. Anyway, that's the 102 acres are then within this particular map. So it is a mosaic, and so now you have to ask the question, well, why would you break up the mosaic in this fashion? Is there a reason to do it? And that's what we want to talk about here, because yes, it is important, because it isn't all one thing. It's not all flat. It's not all of one type of environment. So Jonathan, you want to talk about that?
So as far as the central campus area goes, there's really kind of 2 very distinctly different regions. One is around Pilgrim Hall, with dorms C and D adjacent to it. And what's interesting is, even though C and D, I think, are 3-story buildings, they're in a little bit of a depression in the landscape, so they have a much lowered mass or lower density presence. They sort of tuck themselves in behind Pilgrim Hall, and Pilgrim Hall is really just a 2.5-story building. So that end of the campus is somewhat smaller scale in feel than if you go to the other end, E and F, which really are full 3-story buildings on a flat site, surrounded by flat terrain. So those are very different scales of areas. So the first thing was, if we have to create metrics for what can go in the zones, does it make sense for the metrics to be exactly the same right around E and F as it does around Pilgrim Hall? And our advice here is it does not. It makes sense for there to be some difference between those 2 zones. So, because part of the key to creating greater density and creating the tax revenue that the town is looking for is that we created that density around the existing buildings. We organized around Pilgrim Hall, we organized around dorms E and F, and created a very compact set of concepts in the illustrative plans that showed that you can really get close to those buildings and have it work really well. So if you're getting close to those buildings, it makes sense to key off those buildings in terms of scale. So that creates a different set of metrics for the coding in there. Then the opportunity is you have a pretty big gap between those 2 areas, and that's the C-RC area, and that could take one of those other zones and use those metrics, or it could have its own metrics. Again, that's an area where you could even go bigger. If you had a assisted living space where you have big blocks of buildings, or larger clusters of buildings. So there's an opportunity to treat that as 3 distinct areas and really make them work hard and be dense, but still have meaningful open spaces between them. And that's how we got to a yield out of this area that was actually greater than what had been indicated in the previous plans. So, but in order to do that, you need to do your coding a little bit differently in each of those vicinities. And so that was the impetus behind taking that central campus, instead of just making it one big undifferentiated zone to break it into 3 zones. And that's fundamentally the next step here. And then there's other refinements around that. For example, it's very important where the lines get drawn around these zones. Not to get too lost in the details, but for example, around E and F, one of the keys to success for density around E and F was to make sure that we could park, for example, behind F toward Bridge Street. So we made sure that line was in a place where you could get double-loaded parking behind F and really leverage the area you have. So these lines have been very, very carefully drawn to allow and promote the density that we've shown in the illustrative plans, and also to give a developer who doesn't follow the illustrative plans, who just comes up with their own concept plan, the maximum flexibility within each of those zones. So that's what the attempt was here. Emil, what did I miss?
No, that's good. The other thing I'll point out is, in addition to preserving the heritage landscape, there is value that's kind of subtle here between the heritage landscape and what's UE, the utility expansion area. Both will be perceived when they're completed as sort of natural environments. They'll be open space, very spacious, and both of those serve that intense, compact development in between. The buffers, the natural area to the right, the green area going up the hill, again, is a natural area, heavily wooded. It separates, provides a nice distinction between the compact build-up area and the top of the hill. So this is actually laid out in kind of a subtle manner, kind of linear across the center of the campus, but in a way where everything kind of serves the other thing and makes the site kind of more cohesive and
allows for greater density,
allows for greater density.
because you're
especially
leveraging the adjacent open spaces.
And, you know, we're looking at densities up to now, just roughly, just based on numbers, close to 10, 6 to 10 per acre, you know, for dwelling units. So it's pretty high density.
I'm sorry, 6 to 10 what?
Dwelling units per acre, which we'll get at, dwelling units per acre, you know, in the development.
How many people
6 to
are you
10.
anticipating in each of the dwelling units?
We're going to get into the chart.
Pardon?
We're
Get
going
into the
there.
chart there. Yeah, that's a good question.
So, just a question
Yeah.
on, between the CRC and the SRC, are you thinking that you're going to designate specific uses within those, or specific densities within
Yeah,
those?
we could do both. Again, it's up to the board. We did see a specific, because of the CRC is a little flatter and has a little bit, has the right space for like a senior service building, like assisted living building, for example, larger building,
And larger parking around it.
and parking around it on a flat surface would be important.
So,
That doesn't exist around the
So just
SRC.
a question, is that the only use that you would allow in that space, or would that have multiple potential uses?
Multiple.
We could have multiple, that's what we have to decide. That's our next, we have to talk about uses. That's really not determined, but the initial thought was, this is probably the most likely development in this area is going to be residential of some sort.
So the idea here, oh, go ahead.
You might want something that, you know, is sort of in that same realm.
So the idea isn't to limit the uses within those 3 zones, but the idea is to create an appropriate intensity, density, and dimensional requirements so that it makes sense with the adjacent buildings and the topography. So with the focus of creating compactness, more yield out of this thing, but then leveraging the adjacent open spaces. So, just playing which of these things is not like the other, and making sure the coding makes sense for its context.
Yeah, the other problem with relying on uses is that use can change over time, the market can change, that business could change dramatically, so.
Yeah, but once you're built,
but-
unlikely you would have much change. I mean,
But what I'm
unless-
saying is what's more important is the form, is the size of the building, it's the location, how it fits in with other.
Talking form-based code. I knew we were going to get there eventually.
So again, the idea is to create a map that allows for both. It allows for somebody to come in with their own concept, or somebody to come in and adopt parts and pieces, like a menu, like a Chinese menu, off of the illustrative plans or adopt a whole illustrative plan. So the idea is to build in flexibility, but in an intelligent way that's specific to each of those areas. So, and then be able to launch into coding that makes sense around those areas.
So one of the problems here was defining, once we came up with the illustrative plan around this, was to actually define the sectors in terms of its location. So, Pat, can you go to the next map B on the next slide?
And I see we've got the roads back again, but I don't see any other difference.
The difference is the proposed roads are now drawn in as dashed lines. Again, you can probably see on your handout a little clearer than I
No,
was.
I remember this is what Jonathan had about 4 meetings ago and took out.
Yeah, this shows, and one of the reasons we wanted to show it was to show how the actual proposed roads would be used to create the boundaries for specific zones. And, where possible, we would use center line of road, existing road or proposed road as a natural place to change. We don't really have a survey drawing or site plan where everything, the bearings and distances are all established. So we just don't have that at this point, but we can really approximate pretty closely, both in terms of area size.
So in other words, the illustrative plans and any other logical way to use this is organized around how do you get on and off the site, how do you move through the site. And given that the central campus district or central campus zone is a particular shape, there's only a couple ways you can put roads in here. There's not an unlimited number of ways to put the roads in. You basically need to divide up the areas that are wider so you can get access to them. And so, again, I think I mentioned this before, but what was interesting in all of the explorations of different ways of using the site, different uses, different intensities, different maps, was there was a commonality to where the roads made sense, and also where parking made sense and where buildings made sense. And so that something has to inform where these division lines are. So what we did is we tried to make them as generalized or distilled as possible so that they would be flexible for as many different approaches to this thing as possible. And incidentally, this configuration of zones accommodates each and every one of the illustrative plans. Every one of the illustrative plans, no matter which uses you use or which building layouts you use, fits in these divisions of zoning maps. So it's a way to distill it so that you've got to draw a line at some point. You have to pick a line. And I gave a good example of behind F. Through the analysis of the area around E and F, we determined that it makes sense to go right to the top of the steep slope because then we can get double-loaded parking behind it. So no matter what, that's useful, no matter how you use that site. So that's an example of where a little bit of thought or analysis about how this thing could get built out informs where you draw the lines.
And as you get denser and denser in your development and more compact building, there's a necessity for having a network of streets so that you have more than one way to navigate around the site. So that's one reason you see some of these parallel roads, is that they actually loosen up the site in terms of traffic, make it safer to travel in, make it more convenient. And where we, in this case, put in a road off Woodbury Street into what would be a central green area, thinking that it doesn't have to go in there, but if you needed one, if it were determined that one would be useful or it would be safer with better sight lines there than the other location, then you could do it. That would be a great place to do it for a lot of reasons. And adjacent to a meadow area, adjacent to then a built-up area on the right. So again, as you build compactly, you have to be concerned about the traffic flow. And then also separating vehicular and pedestrian traffic on the site through paths and so forth is going to be another part of this whole concept. But we're looking at basically now the big idea here is to look at that central area and say, there are 3 distinct areas that should be coded slightly differently. We're not trying to establish uses at this point, but they legitimately can be used slightly differently, taking advantage of all the existing buildings that are there and improving on them, and keeping that one open space in the center for multiple uses, either residential or commercial, larger building and so forth. So that was the idea, to build in that flexibility. So you have the 2 built-up areas on the end and then something in the middle that's a little bit lower, it's a little bit more spacious. So there's a differentiation as you drive through there, it's not a series of replicated buildings, cookie-cutter houses going right across this field. It's all a little bit different, but multiplex houses. So it's just a very efficient way to build up the site.
So-
Question?
Yeah.
So by further segmenting these to be in, reflect the character of the land,
Mhm.
are you thinking that this would then assist with selecting the potential uses in each area?
It could.
But it doesn't dictate.
You have said earlier that the CRC is the flat portion of the land and would lend itself to residential or some,
Commercial assisted
Commercial.
living.
so I'm wondering, because you have further segmented what was the central area on a previous map into 3 components, that then focuses the land use and uses, potential uses, to come up with something that would be most in harmony with those parcels.
Well, what it would do is if you did your coding thoughtfully, what would happen is probably your maximum building sizes, your heights. Let's just take height, for example. Your building height might be lower, might be 2.5 stories around Pilgrim Hall, but then when you get out in the middle of the campus and up toward E&F, it could be taller. It could be 3 full stories, not 2.5 stories. So it doesn't dictate the use, but if you were doing an assisted living, wouldn't you pick the area with the 3-story limit rather than the 2.5-story limit?
Well,
That's all.
that's what I'm getting at is, because as we become more specific as to the parcel and the potential uses and how those are, and the density and structure and size, that's going to affect how we code it.
Yes.
So that's where I'd like to go.
That's next. We
Good.
first have to adopt a map.
Yeah.
Well, so the next question is, so what, other than the roadway showing on zoning map B, why do we have 2 versions?
There's no difference between those 2
No, I
zone
understand
sectors,
that.
no
I'm just
difference.
wondering what the thought pattern was between, is this sequential, showing us A is the sort of base philosophy, and then adding B is really the, adding in the roadway or circulation patterns that you think support that?
There are a bunch of reasons to have those in there. Number 1, to show transparency of how we got there. It was a distillation process, just as you said. And number 2, it's up to the board to decide which map is more useful.
Well, my only reason for asking, because if we say, well, we like zoning map B, does that then institutionalize the roadway design that's there?
Depends upon how you code it. You could
Well,
create
the
flexibility in the code, or you could say you have to follow the roads.
Okay, well, hold on. Then the answer is yes. It institutionalizes that roadway.
The 2 things you need to code are the building form standards and the public spaces standards. And the roads are public spaces, there's sidewalks, there's streets, there's street trees and so forth. So that would all be that should be part of the code. The roads actually set up the compact development. That's the whole basis for compact development, is to set that up, because you need those roads in there.
So really by adopting this, then you are eliminating potential uses.
You can differ from this plan.
That's my question.
This is not absolute.
Right, that's my question.
You know, it,
Is that, and we need to before we can vote on that, we need to understand where you're going in terms of institutionalizing a
Okay.
illustrative plan and what impact that has on flexibility for development of this.
well, what it might state is that, you know, your street has to be 28 feet. You have two 10-foot travel lanes and a parking on one side. You have sidewalks on two sides. You have street trees on one side or something,
No,
those kinds of things.
I'm not arguing that. I'm really at a very base level. Originally, you know, if you looked at the central area, 14.9 acres, in theory, we were having early discussions, well, you could put in assisted living or memory care, or even there was talk about early on, you know, if a bio firm came in and wanted to take the whole campus, you know, and they said, gee, we want CRC and SRC in addition to the upper campus. How does that impact that potential?
They could have all of those spaces, but if it was a single entity, their buildings would have to be 2.5, if the board pleased, they might need to do 2.5-story buildings near Pilgrim Hall, 3 stories near E and F, and so it'd all be one owner, but there would be different metrics to it. So it wouldn't necessarily predicate the uses, and then you'd have to decide. The board would have to decide, do they want any commercial uses up near Pilgrim Hall? You have to vote on that.
And that's what I'm getting at, because we are going towards a form-based code that John Witness specifically and David Gamble said this site really is not conducive to doing that.
But
And
this
by-
this isn't it isn't a form-based
No,
code.
Rick,
Don't
it is
argue.
not a form-based code.
Don't
You
argue.
didn't, no, Rick,
It is.
stop.
It is.
I'm going to tell you something. No, there are going to be illustrative plans that can be adopted, and they may have forms within them. But that is by no means mandated. There's the absolute flexibility for a developer to come in with their own concept plan for the uses that we indicate, and they will not be bound by those illustrative plans.
And if a New England Biolabs type company came in and said, we don't need any of those roads, they don't have to put any of them in.
So let's go back to, again, I just want to make sure we're clear on, because you were going and talking about heights and sizes of buildings.
Yeah, that's if the board pleases.
Well, that's where I'm going, because I know that's where we are going,
Yes.
which is form-based code.
Well, that's not form-based code. Those are just charts in
We're-
John Witten's
We're drawing a
code.
picture of what we want there. So it is a formal form-based code, so as opposed to not form-based code. So I'm not arguing against that. I just want everybody to understand what's happening here, so that if the board adopts within each of these districts a size, height, type of building, then, and that's predicated in code, and that's what I'm trying to understand here, is we're saying to you, well, if you build it to this size, in this configuration, with these setbacks, then we'll allow you to do this, and I'm making this up, by right. If you don't, and you want to come in and build something different, we're going to make it special permit. Is that where we're going?
That was
Yes.
Marnie's idea.
Yes, that's it. That's it.
Exactly
So it's
right.
flexible. It allows you to go either route.
Either way.
It doesn't
Well-
prevent you from going either route.
No, I want to get down to the actual coding and how this mapping and dissecting and sectorizing of this will actually impact the coding of this. So I understand there will be flexibility, that they could do anything, but my question is, to what level of detail are we going to get in terms of...
That's up to the board. That's the next discussion.
This is actually a hybrid code, Rick, so it's not form-based completely. is not
It's
what we
got
do.
some elements of it, though.
It is, there's elements that are prescriptive in this, and I know there's some objection from the
No,
seminary. on it.
I'm not objecting.
I know
to-
that, but the prescriptive part is necessary in order to get to as of right, and.
Well, that's where I'm going. That's what I'm trying to understand. I
And
want the-
what's neat about it is that it is flexible, because all the tightening comes at the end of it when you get down to the very details. You can loosen it up and make it very flexible when you get actually to the metrics on the zoning, which you'll see down the line what that means. But there are certain critical things that need to be covered in a prescriptive way, and then,
For example.
well, like building forms and their placement and the relationship between the buildings and the streets.
So if you prescribe the building forms and their placement,
Right.
that then will dictate potential uses.
No, not
No?
necessarily. No, you can use it many different ways. We're talking about setbacks, which you're used to, setbacks. We're talking about
Will
build two lines.
Will the form take, will the form be in a square footage type form and a building height type form, or how do you, because as you.
What we learned from Barry Abramson was that residential use is going to be one of the
Right, we
most
know,
likely.
I believe it's going to be residential in the
So
center.
we
and
looked at-
My personal belief is it'll be residential up on the top.
Yeah,
So I believe it's all going to be residential, but that's just me. and
that
I'm
seems
not-
to be the most likely this day and age and.
Given the
what's gonna
market
happen. Yeah,
currently, I
location.
think that's true. So I'm just wanting to understand, as you dictate form, how that impacts the value of the property. That's what I'm really most concerned about.
As we go into it, you can, if a metric is put forth and you say that seems too restrictive, then you just say that seems too restrictive. We got to start somewhere and put some
Yeah,
numbers
no.
down. We have to fill in some blanks.
Okay, well, why don't we go
So
there?
why don't we just do it, and then if somebody feels like it's too restrictive, and part of this also is, we need to take it for a test drive. We need to make a draft, make a
No, I
make
get
a
it.
draft.
I get it.
And then test it out. Does this allow for enough flexibility? And you try it out. Or are there tripping points that'll get us to a place we don't want to get to? Do we need to tighten that up somewhere? Do we need to, we've got to start somewhere. And the first step is to adopt a map. And we could adopt it provisionally even.
Yeah, and that was just my question is,
Yeah.
if by adopting the map, you're institutionalizing a specific type of use.
Again, we could make this the next point of departure, and you could say, trial, the jury's out, right?
Because we don't know what's going to happen here.
So-
There was, there was,
No, I mean, till the end of
there's
this, our
one other-
process.
One other thing that I think bothers the seminary, but doesn't bother me, which is site plan review. And I think, would you have all new buildings subject to site plan review? Yes.
Well, new construction,
New
I think,
construction would
would
be
be
also-
subject to special permit.
Wait, could I hear that again?
All new construction. So, for example, if all the buildings at the top of the hill, the Kerr building or the chapel in that complex was torn down.
Well, it sounds like you've made up your mind already on this.
Well, no, I mean, I think it almost would have to be, because it would be, the uses, in my mind, that could happen at the top of Brown's Hill are really expansive. I mean, it could be residential, it could be any number of things. And there's where the uses are anybody's guess. I mean, everybody talks about New England Biolabs. Is that likely? Who knows? But we have water tanks up there. It's the highest point in Essex County. Their abutters, they're right up against the boundary line. So I think with respect to new construction, I think, Bill, you are a bit in agreement with me that special permit might
I guess
be-
special permit
Might
encompasses
require-
site plan review by its
Well, there are
nature.
two different things here. Site
Well,
plan
there are two
review.
different
Site plan
things.
review is less.
Yes.
Right.
But it doesn't, as John Whitten said, you can have different iterations of special permit. So you can craft the special permit in a way that if certain conditions are satisfied, it would be
Right. Why don't
fairly easy. So,
we take a section and just work through it so we can get,
Well, before we do that, what would be great to do is, what do we do as a point of departure for the zone map? That's the first step. Then we play with the code a little bit. So let's finish one sort of task here, and we can provisionally adopt one of these maps. We can, again, as a point of departure, but that's the next step. Then we launch the code.
okay, well, let me just ask this question. If we provisionally adopt zoning map A, then the illustrative plans can be predicated on zoning map B, correct?
Sure. But it'd be better to pick one,
B, on both.
yeah, it'd be better to pick, you really want one map to show up in your zoning bylaws. You don't want two zoning maps.
They work for both maps.
Yes.
Marnie.
And they're both exactly the same sectors. It just
Right.
shows,
no, I know. I would just say my preference is for flexibility, so A would be my preference, even though I understand why you laid out the roadway, and I'm not dismissing that. I'm just saying it allows some creativity in uses of those zones. How much, I don't know, but we don't know either.
so again, we could provisionally adopt one map and then go into the code and then loop back around and, like I say, take it for a test drive. Try it out.
That's fine.
I think by right, we should have one map. I mean, I think you have
Yes.
one map.
Yes.
But
Wait a
But
minute.
we're not gonna
Right.
have,
Wait a minute. Make sure you.
five different maps. I'm not going to have five different maps
Nope.
with five different unit
Nope.
configurations.
Gotta be
Nope.
one zoning.
One
It's
zone
gotta
map.
be
Zoning
one thing, and that's the by right.
Yep.
Whoa, well, be
No,
careful.
Well-
that's
what you're
not
saying.
It's not
quite
by right.
accurate.
Yeah.
No, so the illustrative maps are going to be significant for the by right and the reuse of existing buildings.
We're not to the by right and
By
special
right.
permit yet.
Yet,
We're
but
we're
the
delineating
map
areas.
itself is just the delineation of the areas.
And the grandfathered buildings are by right,
Right.
but so far, that's it.
Well, that's.
So far,
as
so far.
As far as we've gotten. Yeah.
So far, that's it. There could be other things, but we haven't gotten there.
Yeah.
And all the buildings are going to be grandfathered, correct?
The existing buildings are grandfathered, yeah, whether or
Pardon me?
not they poke into, yes, whether or not they poke into buffer zones or not, which another thing is we're going to get to is buffer zones. We haven't drawn buffer zones on any of these maps. We're assuming the buffer zones will be delineated in the codes. Perimeter buffers.
Before we decide which one to vote on, I know we had gotten a letter from Ken Barnes. Would we ask to see if the seminary wanted to comment?
No.
Well, we need a zoning map
Right.
showing different aspects of this campus, because at some point, these parcels will be sold. And if we don't have
No, I understand that. I
areas
just didn't know
delineated-
if we had to, yeah, I'm just, having read what he wrote, I just didn't know if we wanted to see if they had a preference on A or B, but.
Madam
that's up-
Chairman, I'd be happy to address Beth's question.
Sure. Go ahead.
First of all, let me just say that, again, wonderful work here. And if we had a preference in terms of which of these two maps would be the zoning map, we would prefer zoning map A because they show the existing roads. That's not to say that someone wouldn't want to come along and change the roads, but if this is the point of departure, I think we would prefer zoning map A. Thank you.
So where are we?
Board needs to decide.
Pardon me?
The board needs to decide.
Well, there are two options here. We can take a vote on zoning map A, and I have no problem with that, or we could take it for a short test drive, and I mean short, just around the block, not all around town. If it's possible to do that.
Well,
You gotta look at the
I
code
like
first.
Jonathan's
No.
suggestion. We start with something definitive, populate it, and then come back and test drive it. 'Cause
Whatever the board's pleasure.
Well, I like the showing of the existing, or the proposed roads, only because it sort of makes sense of the illustrative map, which would associate this with this more sense than than the first. The first was a step forward in the right direction, but then the logic now is embodied in now that combination of road and building layout, I think is a little bit clearer with the existing roads indicated. And again, these are not intended to be the only way you can do it. You know, there is flexibility in here, but this, again, just gives the rationality behind, the thinking behind why something was laid
I
out.
mean, the real difference between A and the sector plan is that you've taken one central development area and you split it in two.
3.
Three?
Three.
Where's the third?
One,
Oh,
two,
yes,
three.
3. And so, you know, I think it's important that we understand why that needs to be in 3 groups. So what is going to be done on this part of it? That can't be done on that part of it, that can't be done on that part of it. So I'm happy to split it into 3 groups, but before we vote on it, we ought to know what the rationale is for that. What's going to be different about this, from this, from this? Is that, you know, really necessary? Do we
Even
really need-
before talking about roads, you want to talk about 3.
I think that's
3
way more
different areas.
germane.
Yeah.
That's a good,
Way more germane than the roads. I'd like to stop talking about the roads.
Yeah.
And talk about coding, and we'll come back to the roads
So
later.
let's just do A, and then we can come back to the
Yes,
roads.
yes.
Okay. So the rationale for having a separate zone by buildings E and F, and Emil and Jonathan, correct me if I'm wrong, is that those buildings, E and F, are quite large and they're 3-story. So the kind of development that you would cluster or congregate there could be townhouses or
Assisted living,
even assisted living. But
Yes.
it could, those
Bigger.
buildings could mirror buildings E and F in terms of the height and the
Sure.
scale.
I want to follow your path, Jonathan.
Sure.
Will you take the lead and just drive this, please?
Okay, I'll be quiet. You drive the bus.
not sure of a bus driver's license here, but.
Just don't drive us into a ditch.
So I agree with Bill's assessment that the most important thing is to take these 3 zones, you know, and look at them independently. So Emil, what might be helpful is for us to get the chart out and look at what the different,
Just a quick
Would-
question.
right, yeah, go ahead.
Just clarification.
Sure.
So are we presumably going with A?
for the moment.
Yes.
Okay,
And we'll come back and revisit it,
okay.
because they're the
just wanted to
exact same map.
No, point of clarification only.
Yep, exact same map. So we'll start with A, and let's look at, and I think a great place to start, to Marnie's point, is around E and F, because E and F are so particular and so big.
They're also valuable.
Yes, and valuable. It's a great place to start because it's pretty straightforward, I think. E and F are pretty straightforward. Let's start with the low-hanging fruit there. And the harder part is over by Pilgrim Hall, because I think that takes more creativity to nestle into the heritage landscape there and make some sense of it. So I vote for starting with E and F, and let's just try talking about some coding around that E and F.
Can we call it NR instead of E and F?
Absolutely. I'm just trying to make
Yes.
sure everybody knows where we are.
I just
So-
want to keep clear
Yep.
on where we are.
Yep.
We're in NR.
Yep, NR. So Emil, do you want to guide us in filling in the blanks?
well, it might be good to have the illustrative plan here, you know, as a,
So should we get that up?
so that would be the next,
So,
the next one.
3A? High
Yeah,
density
3A,
plan?
yeah.
and then you could zoom in on the E and F area.
This is the high density.
It's the high-density development.
And what's a little confusing about looking at this drawing, it's actually layers and layers of exploration on top of each other. So you'll see there's a ghost of a assisted living building underneath some multiplex buildings. And it just shows what's great about the layers is you can see that lots of things can happen in there. But we're just going to focus around E and F here.
Clarification?
Yep.
I'm looking at the map from February 6, 2023. Is this It looks like it's very
That's it.
similar, but.
That's it.
It is it.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, but you're missing the congregate housing, or is that there and I don't see it?
Okay,
Well,
now,
this-
since I'm the only member of the planning board that participated in the original design of buildings E and F, I would take great exception to putting the parking behind, because the way that land slopes down to the roads, everybody along Bridge Street and at that intersection is going to be looking up at a car parking lot. And E and F were designed with a buffer zone so that you're going to take down a large part of that buffer zone to build the parking lot behind them, particularly the parking lot that's sort of parallel to Bridge Street behind. So I would, that would be a cause of concern. And the other thing is that the two little buildings that you've squeezed in there, just to the, right there, sort of similarly, they're on a little crest that was designed to remain treed so that people on Bridge Street wouldn't have to stare at people's windows at night. And if you're going to really develop that, you're going to remove a very important buffer. And I would take exception to that. The original E and F were designed and pushed back from the streets so that the neighbors wouldn't have to stare in people's windows. And to the extent you add buildings in that direction,
Can I make a suggestion?
So there's already
yes,
some clearing
yeah,
there.
yeah, this is very important. And you put two buildings right in there, and you put a parking lot right in there. It's
Can
all
I
winter
make a
long.
Just for
suggestion?
clarification, we were just looking at Google Earth here at what's cleared and isn't cleared around E and F. So
The
that's what we're looking
backside
at
of
here.
E and F is all wooded, and now you would clear it, right?
Well,
Can we
Uh,
just,
yes.
can we go through this whole thing before we start designing it?
Yeah.
Sure.
So we understand where it's going?
Yep.
So-
Emil, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, the idea was to make this, rather than keep E and F, the two large buildings there on the bottom, as isolated pieces in a bigger complex, sort of lost on their own here, the idea was to create
Neighborhood.
other buildings around there, residential buildings, or they could be mixed use, or they could be whatever, that's somehow related to them and related to the street. So if you think about what's there right now, you have a very wide asphalt strip running right in front of E and F that's got 90-degree parking on one side and 90-degree parking on the other side, and it's got to be 60 feet wide going right in front of that, and that's what's there now. So the idea here was to turn it into more of a residential, identifiable piece in the composition where the buildings start to relate to each other. So if you look at that, I don't know if E is on the left there, but there's a building directly across the street that has a number 8 on it. That's an 8-plex building, fairly large, 15,000 square foot footprint. But that's a building that starts to replicate some of the dimensions on the E and F building. So what we were trying to do there is to kind of introduce those or integrate those two very large 3-story buildings with smaller buildings around it. So what you have is kind of a building up of structures in a very close proximity to each other that all support each other as
Front to
part of it,
back.
part of a system. Yeah, yeah.
Question, just so I understand the coding in that building that you're referring to with the 8 on it, is that 8 units or 8,000 square feet?
That's actually 8,000.
Okay.
That's about 8
8,000.
units.
That's what right, so I was figuring it was probably 4 units
Yeah.
or something like that.
We use the multiples of 2,000, 2,400, or in that range for residential
Right.
units.
So-
Yeah,
right.
that was a building
So
unit.
4,
Yeah.
okay, got it.
So but the existing buildings are only about 1,000 square feet per unit.
E and F?
Yeah.
No, they're
Yes,
in
they
the
are.
tens of thousands.
The dwelling units are about 1,000 square feet per dwelling unit.
Yeah.
You're right,
Right.
they are.
Oh, you're talking about the
But those,
individual units.
those, if they go market rate, they're gonna be modifying an awful lot in those buildings to make them at least double the size. I mean, it seems to me, not all of them, but, you know, they're gonna be, I think, right now there's 109 units in that. I'll bet you it decreases by a third by the time any renovation is done on that. So, to get more livable units in there.
Well, that's the other question. Are we going to modify them for market rate housing, senior housing, 55-plus housing?
Let's not go down that
What is
road
going
yet.
to be the load
I'm
on
not
the
gonna decide
schools?
that.
Okay.
Not yet, Bill.
No, this is, to what degree is it important, I guess, to make this part of this more of a neighborhood or a community settlement here with nice features, making it walkable and so forth. And it's not all pretty, there's a functionality to it, but just a more pleasant experience being in this particular environment as opposed to walking down an asphalt, 60 feet wide asphalt road.
Right,
You know, in front of those
and this
buildings.
is where landscaping really comes into play. So
Yeah.
you can really address, I think, some of Bill's issues with appropriate landscaping.
Yeah, and also, that road that goes in front of those E and F right now, that goes all the way to the water treatment plant, so it's like a shotgun. It's a straight line going all the way down there, so it's like a drag strip going right down in front of that. Is that a residential community? I mean, maybe it works okay in a dormitory setting, but,
No, I get it. 'cause
is it a
looks like
residential
city
community?
street.
so that was
Just
one.
for everyone's edification, there are 209 units in buildings E and F. And I think to your point, if there are about 1,000
There's
square-
109 in E and F, and then.
109?
Yeah, there's 40 in another, and 60 in A and B. So-
40 in C and D. Oh, 109, I apologize, you're
Yeah.
right, it's 109.
So, keep going.
So, so this is an identifiable component or part of a larger system. We can then maybe jump to the stables, which is the other, Jonathan, I don't know if you want to add anything to this, but this is really nestled, if you look where we drew in just above that building that's labeled 8, which is like a roundabout up there, that actually is a nice incline, so it forms kind of a backstop or backdrop
Can you
to that.
can you point that out?
So,
You have a
Pat, if
point.
you go back and circle the building 8, up above E and F.
Right there. Now, there's, yeah,
Oh, okay.
It's nestled into the hillside, so even if it was 3
Hillside.
stories,
Yeah.
it would read as 1.5 stories from up above.
Which is
And
similar to like C and D, how they
yeah.
don't seem as tall, right? You were saying that earlier.
Yes, because
C&D.
they're in an indentation.
Yeah.
And it forms a nice enclosure, I think, for that whole space down there. So again, it's a subtlety that you only experience on the ground when you're there. But it's something that would, when you really think about it and you start to study this and see why is there a little crook in the road, for example? Well, it takes the sight line away, takes the straight shot away
From Woodbury Street.
You know, if you're,
from Woodbury.
if you're going from the stables north, I hope you're not drinking, because there's so many intersections that weave into a figure 8 there.
Those are pedestrian routes.
Oh, okay. Question, so, I get where you're going. Can you tell me how many units there are outside of E and F that you've shown in this illustration?
Sure. There's, in the north, there are 109 in E and F. There are only 12 dwelling units,
New.
new construction, 23,600 square feet here in that north complex.
So how many units?
So these are
12 new ones.
2,000 square foot apartments, condominiums.
Those are condos.
Yeah, condominiums.
So E and F are going to be converted to condos?
No,
Could
I
be.
don't know.
That's an important difference.
So,
Condo owners like to be near other condo owners. In some cities like New York, they even restrict that.
can we not get involved
Okay.
in each building and what we're using
You
yet?
asked how many units? I was just-
Yeah. The
So
new
I'm
construction's
still trying to get clarification on the number of dwelling units in,
NR.
the- I'm having it
If this is
in
H, this looks like...
RC,
That's 4.
SRC,
Oh, okay.
and
So it's
NR.
12 units in those 2 little and 1 big building?
So in NR,
So-
there's 12 new units, correct? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
And then I think Rick is asking for how many new units in the other two sections.
Well, the 12, actually, there are 8 units, we're that building with the 8, and then each of the buildings, there's 2 in each of the 2 buildings.
Is there another building down this way?
That building is part of this central campus, actually.
Yeah, I can't read the.
It's not part of the neighborhood that
Bay
ENF
over
is in?
corner there is so small.
I mean, it looks like an extension of
Yeah, extension
E.
of E.
How many units are in there?
Those are 4 units.
4.
That's
okay.
4,000 square feet. There are 2 levels in that.
But that's not part of this neighborhood, you don't think? You've just, it's not,
Yeah, that's part of,
It's
that's
part
right
of the
here.
whole-
It's colored as
right,
part of
it's
that.
right,
neighborhood.
right there.
Yep, it's part of
How
NR.
many units are in there? 4?
No, there are 2 units in the 4s.
There are
I'm trying to
4,
get it.
and then there are 4 in the, where it says 8, and then there are 4 over on the right, 4, 8, 12.
What are the little?
Okay, got it.
Could you just
Got
give me
it,
the
He wants to know
total,
those tiny,
total
tiny
new
ones.
units?
The tiny,
12.
tiny ones,
Well,
the little,
Take a picture.
little
There-
tiny ones. I can't read the print.
Each, there are 4 units there total. There are 2 in each unit, 2 levels, so there are a total of 4.
Or in each of those 2 on either side of the walkway?
4 in each of the ones that, there are 2 in each of the ones that say 2. That means there are 2 floors, and there's a unit on each floor.
But bear in mind, even with the illustrative plan, nobody's dictating that the buildings are in these positions or look like
Yeah.
this.
I'm just trying to get a sense of
Yeah.
Yeah.
density
Yeah.
and a description. So could somebody,
These are 1.5s.
okay, 1.5 what?
Well, the 1.5 is over in the stables area.
That's what he was asking about, though.
That's over-
1.5 what?
What?
Square feet, units, occupants?
The numbers on these illustrative plans are square footage indicators, not,
1,500 square feet.
Ah, okay, thank you.
all of the numbers are square footage
So
indicators.
that's one, so it's 1 unit.
It's an up and down. If you're talking about the townhouses in
Yeah.
the stables area, there are 2 levels, each 1,500, so it's a total of 3,000 square feet per townhouse in the stables area.
You want a copy of it?
So I think he's trying to get a total number of how many units.
I just want to know how many proposed units
They're
could
to-
potentially
okay.
happen in this illustration, just so gives me a reference point of understanding.
If you look at this on your page, it's called Zone Construction Distribution Breakdown. Pat, I don't know if you have
Yeah.
that. Pat?
Okay, so, do we have to
Zone
add
Construction
the?
Distribution
here we go. Well, this answers the question.
All right, this is the breakdown, if you want to get to that right now. There are 2 charts here, the top and the bottom. The top one is multiplex residential. What that means is there's no assisted living in that, which only happens in the central part. So, and the bottom one, the multi-plex plus senior services housing, is the one that if you were to introduce an assisted living in that central, this would be the data that you would have for that. So if you look at the top one, for example, across the top are the zones, south, stables, central, north, and totals. And the DU is, of course, dwelling units, square footage, and so forth. And on the left-hand column, dorms A and B, C and D, E and F. So those are folded into this. And then
So-
new construction
Okay,
underneath.
so just there's a lot of information.
Yeah,
here.
there is. Yeah.
So the stables really is SRC, right? In the previous
Yes, it
early
is.
map?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because we're throwing so many different terms around.
right,
it.
right.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts. We're trying to
So-
iron those out.
No, just let me ask a question. So central is CRC, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Or
And north is NR.
is what? NR, right, okay, thank you. I'm trying to be a good student here.
North is NR,
Yes,
you said?
Yeah.
yes. Okay.
So this is a
Okay.
quick breakdown in number of units and square footage.
Right.
So it's a tally. Everything on the right that's shaded in yellow is a summation. So from left to right, those are added together.
So 60, 36, and 121. Right? 96 and 121. So whatever that is.
121 in north dwelling units.
Yeah.
Again, these are reflected in the illustrative plan. This is not a final, it's not anything. It's just to get a ballpark number where we are. And at the bottom chart, the primary difference is in the central, where there, the new construction and senior service housing in the column on the left-hand side indicates that there are 12 new construction multiplex building, or dwelling units, 24,000 square feet. And the senior service housing, 80 beds, so they're not dwelling units, they're beds in that case, but, and 50,000 square feet. And again, the model was the residents at Riverbend. That would be a scale of a building that, of 50,000, that's 25,000 on each of two levels.
So 217 units in those three. Okay,
All right?
thank you.
Yep.
What next?
Did you want to continue talking about the stables area? as
Yeah,
part
why
of
don't
the
why don't we
sector?
get a map up of the stables
There's
area?
I mean, in general,
Pat,
there's
could you go back to that-
there's something
that line?
you've
Yeah, there you go.
done here, which
In
is
on the-
all the existing units are 1,000 square feet per unit, average. And everything you're proposing is 2,000 to 2,500 square feet per unit. That is a totally different market.
Are we talking E and F?
We're talking about south, stable, central, and north.
Any of the-
All
any
of
of
the
the
new
dorms.
development is at, 2,000 to 2,500 square feet per unit, and all of the existing development is 1,000 square feet per unit. Those are two very different markets. 1,000 square feet per unit is a typical two-bedroom apartment. 2,000 square feet per unit is a three-bedroom townhouse with kids in the
Bill,
schools.
excuse me.
Different markets.
Can't understand, can't differentiate what you're saying. It's,
I don't have my mask on.
I know, I don't know what it is. I just don't, I can't understand what you're saying.
I'm saying that they're introducing new units which are more than twice as big as the existing units and represent a very different market.
Right.
And I'm not sure the two markets are agreeable with each other, let's put it that way. Okay, and the 2,400 square foot market would probably be an owner market. I don't know of any apartments that are that big, and the 1,000 square foot you might be able to condominiumize them, but it's really, they're very different markets, and I don't know if they'll work well together. Let's just.
That's fine.
I mean, maybe maybe we're getting too deep into the weeds here, but the thing is, all these numbers are predicated upon that, and how much mass there is, and how many buildings there are, and how big they are,
Well,
are all predicated on that.
That's why I'm asking this. I just want to know the number of units irrespective of their
Okay.
size.
That's all on the
So-
table.
So keep the train going, will you? Where are we going next?
Well, let's go to the Pilgrim Hall area.
Pilgrim Hall, I don't know if you want to talk about this, Jonathan. We're still talking about why 3 sectors. That's the general conversation here, right?
Yep, so same
So we
principle.
could divide it into three
Right.
individual pieces instead
I
of
thought
one.
we got by that.
Oh,
Well-
did we?
Well, but now we have to code them differently. So
Yeah.
Pilgrim Hall,
Oh, no, not again. I can't start.
Pilgrim Hall, as we mentioned before, is a smaller scale building. It's lower in height, and C and D are in shallow depressions in the landscape. So everything is lower and smaller over here. And the other thing is that we assume that Pilgrim Hall will stay, but even if it doesn't, the assumption is that if Pilgrim Hall is taken down, that something would be put back more or less in that same footprint. So what this is doing is it's organizing this neighborhood, so to speak, around a number of different things. Number one, around preserving the open space in front of the retreat house. Number two, about sort of hanging onto the circulation spine, the pedestrian spine that runs from kind of south to north on the whole site, runs from the bottom of the site to the top of the site. So that's your green sort of thread wandering up diagonally to the right on the screen. And then the other thing is it's organized around the position of Pilgrim Hall and the barn next to it. So what the idea here is to try to create some sort of a meaningful open space in the center, and then cluster the buildings around that open space as densely as you can, basically. And there's lots of different ways to do it. So this particular view shows smaller units, so almost like row houses, but you could do units that are bigger than that. You could do units that are much bigger than that. But the idea is that it's organized around meaningful open space. And again, that creates compactness without it just being a meaningless sprawl or denigrating the natural qualities of the site. So there are a lot of different ways to do this, but in general, most likely the heights would be different, and the total square footages would be a smaller maximum. And it might have a different distance from the street than over by E and F, a different zoning setback. So, and then we have to decide what that number is. So, for example, a number that Emil and I have tossed around for heights in the two different areas are, if you were trying to get kind of traditional looking buildings here, 30 feet is a tough height to get a decent roof pitch on a 2-story building. 35 feet is a better height to get to make a 2.5-story building look comfortable. So that number was bandied about, but that needs to be discussed by the board and voted on by the board. Whereas over by E and F, you might add a few feet to that so that you have more of a maximum height over by E and F. So that's an example of a difference that might be here. So you might have smaller setbacks from the street here, and you might have lower heights in this area. And you can kind of, as you look at this, you can kind of feel the smaller scale when you look at the comparison of what we just looked at on the previous sector of the map. And again, that's the impetus behind the different zones and how you might begin to code them differently.
These folks all have garages and backyards.
Maybe they do, maybe they don't.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
again, goes to the issue of new use is very different from the existing uses and whether that's compatible. Okay.
But, again, the organizing feature here is that it's organized around the axis of the buildings, the open space, and the pedestrian corridors and the streets. But it could be many, many, many building forms as long as we pick some maximums, fill in the blanks in the maximums.
So units of that size are going to be $1 million units, maybe $900,000 units. And I don't think those people are going to like having 40B within 100 feet. If there's any interest in doing B and C and 40B. Sorry, I always get these confused.
C and D is next to Pilgrim Hall.
Yeah, C and D.
I think the discussion is that only a portion of the units in each set of dormitories would be
40B?
Well, available for people with 80% AMI, like Willow Street.
Is it like 25% for all to count? Is that?
Each set of dormitories, I think, would have to have their own 25%.
Right. That's what I was asking, though. So it's 25%.
That's my understanding. That might have to be clarified with John Whitten, but that's my understanding. So I think the sense was that it would not all be 40B. And Bill, you make a point, and that's one we need to think about. And
Well, if this is the as-of-right plan, and you design an as-of-right plan that has conflicts in it, let's call it, then no private developer is going to want to do it, so you might as well just sort of scrap it, right? Or it's not going to be, nobody's going to adopt it, okay? And so then the question is, they'll come in with some changes and requiring a special permit under your 3 sort of strategies. So that, I'm just giving you the reaction of an economist to this.
right,
Okay?
and I guess the question really becomes whether buildings E and F could be converted to condominiums. And of course, the units. you would
They
assume
might be with a great deal of work. There's
A lot of work,
a lot of
a
work to
lot of work.
Well, we already had an analysis by Barry on what it would cost to convert those into market rate units, so we know we have,
Do we have that? I haven't seen that.
oh, yeah. It was in the,
I haven't seen the final report that.
no, I haven't either. I've got a draft.
Well, that's more than we have. So,
Okay.
yeah, I didn't know about the costs of
Oh, yeah, he's
conversion
got costs of conversion of those units.
to market rate or to condos, or both?
Market
middle
rate rental.
Oh, market rate rental.
Could be more residential, could be assisted living, could be life science.
What is the 36 here?
Well, I mean, there's no law that these 12 units couldn't be smaller
buildings?
and an increased
Oh.
number.
Yeah, I mean,
There's still
Yeah.
2,000 square feet.
we can't really determine what's going to happen
Varies.
with the
Right.
dormitories. It's
Consultant.
just, that's,
You have to code it, it's,
But I
That's
mean,
not
I
gonna
think
be
there
part of
might
the
be a market for
Working
less
Barry
expensive
Abramson,
condominiums, to Bill's
Right.
point, that would marry better with
sure.
rental units.
We were targeting really at a housing stock that's kind of missing here in town, sort of
Right.
in the middle
So-
of
Jonathan, where are we going?
Well, what we could do next is we've done both ends. We could talk about the middle now.
Yes,
We've done Pilgrim Hall, the south end. We've done E and F, the north end. Now we could talk about the leftover space in the middle.
let's do it.
Well, let's use the references that are on your map, so I know what you're talking about.
Why do we need that? You have 2 neighborhoods with very distinctive character. The dormitories, which are 3-story, multifamily, so on, and then if we go back to the to the stable area, it's a totally different character. It's got these townhouses with backyards and garages.
Maybe. There's other ways to-
Maybe having a nice little buffer zone between them would be a good thing. What do we need that?
Well, we were,
No, just, I'm,
Yeah,
I'm
good
just reacting.
good question.
I
Yep.
mean, it's not serving as a bridge because the two are very, very different. And they might like being apart.
Well, what we've sort of looked at here is what's sort of fun is the utility expansion area, in a sense, forms a buffer and a linkage between the two. So that's the large yellow area where the cursor is sitting. And so you
It's
could,
another reason why not to have anything there.
well, what's lovely is it's instead of calling it a septic, let's call it a bordering meadow. It could be a beautiful open space, very usable, and
They're
very,
going to keep the processing plant there?
the processing plant can be screened, and then the rest of the space can be.
Yeah, let's see, I'm trying to sell these units. Hi, you're 50 feet across from a tertiary septic system processing plant that
Well,
houses, no developer's going to buy that. He's going to say those units are unsaleable.
Can we keep getting bogged down in what the market is telling us. I wish we could get the train out of the station, down the track to a finish point. Can we do that?
Yes.
Jonathan, would you please drive it?
so,
Pat,
again,
Pat,
go
do
ahead.
you have this drawing there?
that would be great to pull up, yeah, that'd be awesome.
Which one are you pulling up?
It's the
Compare and contrast low, medium,
pair and
and
contrast.
low, medium, and high density.
Is this one on a different sheet?
No? Did I not include it?
It's in the, it was in the slide deck that was sent to the board members.
Number 6.
Oh, number 4, 3 build-out options, PDF. Yeah, that's it. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
This kind of focuses on that middle section, Jonathan, that,
Yeah,
Which are we?
Right
yeah,
here.
so
Is that
we're looking-
CR, is that CRC?
this is all three,
Yeah.
really.
Yes.
And what we could do is we could sort of zoom in on the low-density plan for a second, and basically, that's two distinct neighborhoods, and you could have nothing in between, or just a couple of units in between, and they almost have nothing to do with each other.
Question,
Yes,
is this from your low-density, mid-density, and high-density map?
it is.
Okay.
These are just insets. So, so this is basically almost like the boulders to the right and a mini boulders to the left. And
let me
this is the,
each building is a duplex, so there are 2 units in each one of those buildings, and each one has a garage, and they're about 2,600 square feet each.
Yeah, so there are about 25 units in there. 25 or
25, 26, yeah.
26.
so with this, there is, in a sense, a buffer between the two neighborhoods. But I don't think this is low density. It really doesn't leverage the potential of this site. And I think you can leverage the potential and still have beautiful open space, and that was why we, started with low, went to medium, and then ended up with the high intensity. So can we go down a slide? So this was sort of the next iteration, and
Density.
in density, yeah. And so again, in this one, there's still a sort of a minimal connection between the two neighborhoods, but the north neighborhood is very separate from the south neighborhood, and again, they're linked by open space, the bordering meadow. We'll go down to the next slide. And this particular slide, this diagram is showed underneath in the layers on the high-intensity plan. You can see a ghost of the congregate housing, and this shows the congregate housing kind of in the middle here, and it would probably, if you wanted it to be a bit bigger, it might wander to the left, but it, again, is in scale with E and F, and in this particular case, it would probably straddle between the two sectors to the north, which I don't have my letters in front of me. If you were to do a larger congregate care, it might straddle between NR and CR. And what you'd want to do is you'd want to make sure that your code allowed that to happen if you wanted that to happen.
On that congregate housing, do you have a square footage that represents on the drawing?
Emil, do you know what that square footage was?
What we did was, on Google Maps, We took the residence hall, it's 25,000 per floor, 2 floors,
25?
25,000 per floor,
I took a wild ass guess and said 40, but so it's 50, right?
50,000 total.
Actually, it's really kind of 2.5 floors at the residence. There's places that are 3 stories. And what's great is the topography here, because that congregate care housing, if you can see the contours in this plan, it's nestled in a bowl.
Yeah.
And so it allows for that to happen.
So you were thinking that's more than 50,000? If it's 2.5 stories?
It could be more.
Could be more.
It could be more.
Minimum 50, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
Round numbers. And then, again, these aren't,
No, I'm just-
precise.
Again, I'm just trying to get
Yeah.
context and.
Sure. Yeah, but we used residence as a reference point.
Yeah.
And not to get too granular on this, but what's interesting about if you combine memory care has to have proprietary outdoor space that's separate from other outdoor spaces. And what's really great about this is on the uphill side of this, you could have a natural kind of courtyard that is contained for memory care. So there's a great outdoor space that's fully safe and contained for memory care. So just the topography just so happens to work out beautifully for this use.
How did memory care get into, I think you're talking about assisted living, right?
Yes, but there's been discussion that we haven't voted on it yet. We haven't adopted it. But if you have assisted living, you could also have memory care. As a possibility. And I'm just saying that the topography is well suited for this position. You don't have to have it, but if it came up, it works in this topography. That's
One
all.
other note on the topography on that, because that road just above the assisted living building is so much higher than the building itself, this is a place where you probably would not want a flat roof building, with AC units up on the roof. This is a place where you want probably pitch roofs. And I say that only because that's how it would get coded, that there would be a pitch roof on those structures so that you're not looking at mechanical equipment. on
Or at least a
flat
good portion of it is pitched roof and with mechanicals concealed.
If you're gonna bring memory care into this, is there a market for that? I mean, you got Riverbend up the road there a ways.
We're not
We're
going
not
down
there.
that
We're not
road
there.
yet.
We're trying to create flexibility and then have the board vote on, do these sectors make sense and can we begin to code them? Can we begin to apply numbers to them? So that's kind of, we've kind of got the cross-section of what's here.
The other
and-
thing on this, excuse me, Jonathan, was that because of the topography, again, this section, which is the flattest on the site, would be around that memory care where the assisted living would be ideal for parking, surface parking. So it's located in an amenable place for parking that is not on a steep pitch. Anywhere else on this site, you're going to have greater than 5% slopes that would mean you have to terrace your parking.
With gigantic retaining walls between
Part of what-
terraces.
Impresses me here is there's such a great deal of flexibility between the plan we started off with and where we are here that I'm not sure I want to allow any or all of this to be as of right, which means we're going to have to either pick one of these configurations and say that's of right, or we're going to say anything within range of these, extremes, low density, high density, senior housing, extended care, is as of right. I'm not sure. And also, our two designers have said, well, we have these blocks and we don't know if there's going to be, 2 4,000 square foot units, 4 2,000 square foot units, or 8 1,000 square foot units, or 16 little studios in any one of these units. But that's all of right. You can make that choice as of right. Well, the fiscal impact of all those choices is dramatically different. And the problem is that if I grant the flexibility to do anything that I've seen on the board this evening to the developer, that's as of right, I can see, radically different fiscal impacts. I can see radically different neighborhood impacts. So I'm not sure that, that I want the range of options that I've seen tonight to be as of right. On the other hand, I feel totally inadequate in my ability to say which one of them is in fact best, or which one, only one of these should be allowed as of right, which one. I'm
Well, you say that not only the fiscal impact is vastly different between all those options, but also is the support infrastructure requirements and the amount of.
and the traffic and everything is a little different, and the butters, everything is different to the butters. So there's a range here that is so broad that I would feel very uncomfortable allowing anything in that range by right.
Okay,
Well,
but
that's
except
the-
the
that brings
problem
up
is that we aren't marketers. We don't know that kind of stuff. We don't know what the market needs right now.
Well, then I'd like to say, here's a bunch of illustrations, but anything you do is going to require a special permit. Please come in with your exact details.
More germane than that is the board is here to decide what the total cap is, and that's what's important.
So that's what I'm thinking is square footage and units. That addresses the.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
you can.
That addresses traffic and intensity.
Within that, then they can configure.
Residential, commercial?
Multiple iterations.
We have to decide.
They can come up with multiple iterations.
Depending on what their market is.
So the question, though, gets to Emil is the design.
Well, it comes back around, you've heard us say that what this is organized around is meaningful open space, clustering, meaningful clustering,
Got it.
compactness, but meaningful compactness. And you look at every one of these designs, and the commonality is where the open spaces are and where the connectivity is. It's absolutely common, and it's why we were able to come up with one single zoning map.
No,
And that's what all the work has been aimed at.
No, I get it. So, I think we're in agreement in terms of maximum square footage per zone and number of units, right?
Well, we have to vote on that. We have to agree.
But you were shaking your head saying yes. Is that?
Well, we've been talking about a maximum, and we've been basically using the high-intensity numbers that Emil has come up with.
Another alternate way of formulating this.
No, I think that's a great way.
Okay. So,
Obviously, it needs to be voted on by the board, and it needs to be voted on by the town.
I just
Right.
trying to lay the groundwork so we understand what it is that we're talking about.
So number one, we have to agree, are there three sectors or three zones in central development, in the central area, number one? And number two, we could now, that we've seen all of these components, we've seen the menu, could we agree on what the absolute, from the board's perspective, what the absolute cap is, aggregate? And then can we then narrow it down within the sectors? Those are the tasks.
I would agree.
So,
Okay, well, why don't we start with number one, the
So-
sectors?
But question.
and you've seen now how the roads, you've seen the various plans, and they have, the commonality is these all work with the diagrammed roads as they inform the division between the sectors. All these, Bill just said, wow, that's a lot of choices. There are a lot of choices within one zoning map.
So given all the work that you and Emil have put into this, do you have a recommendation?
Well, I recommend that the roads be kept in the map, and that the numbers that Emil has worked up in his charts be voted on as the maximum. And then it's really down to business with things like building heights, setbacks, and maximum square footages, and then uses.
So this.
I think uses are easy, personally. I think we could finish that tonight.
Yeah, I think the uses are pretty straightforward. So why don't we start with the easy things, right?
Do you want to segue to uses?
Do you want
Yeah.
uses?
Could do that. Madam Chair, do you agree we could segue to that?
Yes, we can segue to that. I would like to, if possible, at least determine which map we would like to use tonight.
For the moment, I would prefer to keep the roads in because they help you understand, they help you get oriented as to what we're doing here. If at the end we want to eliminate the roads, that's fine, but
It
for the
could be
moment,
taken out, but it makes sense with an
it
illustrative.
it gives you an orientation. So just at least for discussion purposes, it'd be useful to keep those in there as a reference point. Because when you look at them, you can see the correlation between every single illustrative plan
Would have had to brought.
and every single zone map, and it all makes sense. As soon as you take them out, it's just abstract polygons.
Okay. So, now, I'm looking at the chart that was on the 2-6-23 low, medium, and density.
Mhm.
Is that different from the zone construction distribution breakdown?
Emil, you want to address that?
This particular one is the multiplex configuration. Let me just get to that page. Is the multiplex residential. So the plan that you're looking at is the top matrix there, the multiplex residential. It is not the senior services housing, which is the high-density development analysis on
So-
2-6-23.
So.
I mean, on the surface, the first plan, the multiplex residential, sounds very reasonable, but if you have maximums of dwelling units, and you have a separate maximum of square feet, the range of things that can be built is the following. A prince of Saudi Arabia can come in and build a 150,000 square foot palace. Right? One unit, 150,000 square feet. Or a developer can come in and decide he's going to build 68 little one-bedroom units, you know, in some kind of ugly little single building. And when you just do the numbers, that's the range of
Good point, but this
things
doesn't stand
that-
alone.
that you
This doesn't stand alone. When we do the coding, there'll be
There'll be a drawing.
That's why you never use an FAR. That's why I just never would do it.
Right.
Okay.
The
But I'm
code,
just-
It
the
could be a
code will,
10-story building or
the code will prevent that. When we fill in the charts on the code, we'll prevent the King of Saudi Arabia from coming
The
in.
extremes.
Yes. So that'll be addressed,
Okay.
if you trust that. So, okay. So, Emil, Rick, you had a
Yeah.
question about the chart.
the plan that you're looking at, 2-6-23 is the top.
Right, and
multiplex
so we're
residential.
really looking at stable, central, and north, right?
Yeah.
So we're not looking at south in that table.
Yes.
Correct.
So the total square footage of those three sections is 903 square feet for 217 units.
Yeah, that's right. Take away 60 for the south. And, yeah, subtract 50,000 plus from the 345.
Okay,
Correct.
good.
That's it.
Wanted to know,
Yeah.
reference point again.
So do we want to segue to uses then? You wanted to
Yeah, I think
understand the chart, so should we segue to that?
are easy, right?
I think they are, but
Okay.
the board will find out if they're easy.
Okay, let's discuss uses.
So, Madam Chair, are you going to guide that discussion?
Well,
Or Emil, do you want to discuss? I'm looking for others to guide it,
okay, so,
passing the buck.
yeah, the last chart that Emil prepared, it's number 8.
Okay, where are we now?
This is zones
Uses.
land use permit requirements. I will say this was done back in February,
Right.
so our designations have changed, and I have not updated this.
Yeah, so maybe we should just
But what this
talk
does,
generally about.
yeah, we
I think it could be a crib sheet, but I think to try to fill in the blanks on that sheet wouldn't help.
I
No,
think it's a
that
crib
wouldn't help.
sheet for, you can just have
Yeah,
choices.
let's do a crib sheet,
Yep.
Yeah,
because this is too constraining.
Yep.
right.
Are you talking about the draft from February 1st?
Yeah, the draft February 1st. The
Okay.
title on the top is zones land use
Yeah,
permit requirements.
Yeah, I've
Yeah,
got
we
it.
could,
It
we
just-
can
it
use
just
that
helps.
just for
A prompt.
examples of
It's a prompt,
uses.
yeah.
That's, Pat has it on the screen there.
Okay, So should we start with the NR district, that north residential that contains dormitories E and F?
Yep.
So in terms of uses, certainly we have apartments, townhouses,
Well,
So if you go to the next page, Pat, see, that's sort of the residential options are there, here. Dwelling, multifamily,
well, if you, on page 2 of 3 of your chart that you don't want to use,
right?
residential, it has all the listing of dwellings, dwelling unit multifamily, triplex, fourplex, dwelling multifamily row house, townhouse, dwelling multifamily apartments, condos, dwelling multifamily dormitory conversion, that whole list is actually helpful
yeah.
Yes.
to,
So maybe the process might be to eliminate the things that shouldn't be in the list. Maybe that's the way to use this crib sheet. Just knock them out.
yeah,
Well-
I mean, we don't have to fill in the.
No, no.
Does anybody see anything other than residential there, maybe? As a,
So.
So what's a mixed-use
question-
project with
question-
residential component?
The question then comes down, how we capture this, and I think Jonathan and Emil agreed that, earlier it was 294,000 square feet, 217 units. So, do we want any of these, as Jonathan said, eliminated? Well, in the NR, there is a dormitory, and I think, right? Yes.
there too.
So we want to allow that. Do we want one or two family? I assume those would be condos?
Those are the 12, we have 12 or 14 separate buildings. Or
This plan had very nice townhouses, which probably common wall for their
Yep.
single-family attached.
Mhm.
So yes, you have to have those if you want to.
Yep.
If you like that, you got to allow that. What's home occupation?
I'm thinking I would get rid of residential care, 6 or fewer clients, residential care, 7 or more clients in the NR district. Because I don't think the NR district is suitable for an assisted living facility.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So you want to eliminate those two?
I do.
Okay.
I don't think, and I'm speaking for myself, second unit or carriage house? Well, do we
No.
we don't want a carriage house, but we've seen so many apps, I've seen so many maps, my head is spinning. Jonathan, what was in our, prior map?
Well, there were multiplex houses.
And the prior map you were using was the high density, right?
Yep.
Okay,
Well, there were the larger scale multiplex
so.
residential.
Second unit or carriage house? I don't think so, because you're talking multiple units. But you tell me if I'm wrong.
Well, the only one that could be a mixed unit is that 8.
Say again?
The only one that could be anything other than residential is that building with the 8,000.
If there wasn't the resident,
If there were not a residential, everything residential.
So that would be commercial?
Well, I'm wondering whether there might be a small commercial office or possibility.
bakery or.
Or it could be one of those things where it could be residential or it could be altered into something else, that's
So
non-residential.
leave that in.
Leave that in.
Okay, how about transitional and supportive housing?
I don't think there are enough houses here to do that.
All right, let's get rid of it.
Which one did you say you wanted to leave in?
Well, we've got a whole bunch that we're gonna leave in.
Yeah, but the last one, the one,
Second unit or carriage house.
okay, keep that.
Rick, you asked about home occupation and nobody responded to that. Doesn't our zoning bylaw define a home occupation?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
does,
And is it one employee
yeah.
with an ordinary cottage industry or something like that? So those are pretty standard in towns.
That,
Yeah.
So I can't imagine you'd want to eliminate that.
yeah.
Right, that would be in.
You do.
That would be the live work.
I was just answering your question that went unanswered before you asked what's a home occupation and should it be in?
I would help develop that bylaw, so I.
Perfect.
So do you want to take that out or not?
Leave it, I would leave it in, but,
Okay.
but
And
your
the-
question just sailed out into the
And-
ethers.
Live work.
The
The live work
unit?
is, do you know what, you want to explain what live work is?
That's different.
I don't know.
Oh,
Tell me.
Isn't it the same thing as a home occupation?
no, home occupation is in your home,
Yeah,
your office.
But a live work-
As
you
in a-
actually have a storefront down
As in a commercial unit.
as in commercial units. So
Oh.
it's
I
actually,
think we don't want that.
Yeah.
okay.
so you would live in the back and have it in the front?
We're just talking about the
Have your-
NR section right now.
Have your
is
window
that
on a
correct?
sidewalk.
Correct.
Your business on the sidewalk and live upstairs and. is a-
Okay, let's move up the scale.
Residential accessory use or structure? I don't know how that fits in particularly.
You don't. You want new units, you don't want accessory.
No.
Dwelling,
Well, unless it could be a tool shed, maybe. or it could-
dwelling, 1 and 2 family?
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that could work.
Dwelling, multifamily, dormitory conversion?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah, I guess. Dwelling, multifamily apartments, condos?
yep,
Dwelling, multifamily row house, townhouse?
yep,
yeah,
Dwelling, multifamily triplex, fourplex?
yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you're keeping all of those?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to review. Tell me if I'm wrong, just because it's confusing.
Let's write on the
So-
list.
We're on the list, so we're dwelling, multifamily, triplex, fourplex, and we go all the way down the list, and we've excluded live work, residential accessory use or structure, and all the residential care uses, second unit or carriage house, and transitional and supportive housing. They were all excluded.
So do you really,
May I raise something which is, since you've identified fourplexes, row houses, and you've allowed apartments, you're allowing somebody to put the 80 new units all in one big building. That's what that is.
Say again?
You're allowing somebody to take the,
There's only 12 new units in the north section.
you can put them all in one building, but in the, are we just restricting ourselves to the north now?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, because we get to the middle,
We're not there yet.
okay, then,
All right.
okay.
So is there anything that's missing from this?
I assume other categories like recreation, education, public assembly, can you envision a public assembly in one of the dormitories or
So
as a
shall we
separate
just go-
occupancy?
Do we want to go down that list, though? Because the next one is business, financial, professional.
we should hit it, and if we want to, we should hit it, and if we want to delete it, but we should do it comprehensively.
ATM? No. Not here, not in my mind, but I'm
You
just.
mean eliminate it?
Yes, no?
Others?
What page
Speak
are
up or
you on?
forever hold
I
your
don't
peace.
see any reason to have any of these,
He's right below residential.
Oh, great, ATM.
I don't see any reason to have any of these.
So you would
in-
eliminate office, business service, office, professional, administrative,
Yep.
I would.
on the whole?
So,
Okay,
Well, we didn't want to allow a work unit, which would
Okay.
be, so
okay.
why would we want
Right.
a unit that was just work?
Okay. So you keep going down, retail?
yeah, so all of those are gone, right? The business services?
Yeah, that whole section.
Okay. Retail, neighborhood market, restaurant, cafe, coffee shop. And I
Services general, that whole category is gone, from my point of view.
Yeah.
I think so.
So what about restaurant, cafe, coffee shop?
I know, I was thinking the same thing. I'm going, well, somebody might want to put in the first floor of one of the 109-unit building.
Why wouldn't you want that there, I guess, is my question.
Well, I'm thinking
How
of
would that-
a Dunkin' Donuts standalone, that somebody builds a retail coffee shop there.
It could be stipulated it has to occur inside the
Right,
dormitory building.
Or inside an existing building?
or a new building.
In a,
In a new building. It can be in the building. It can't, in other words, you can stipulate that it can't be a standalone
Okay.
McBox.
okay, got it.
Yeah.
Step then,
So is that stays in?
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So either of those, the neighborhood market or the restaurant, cafe, coffee
Could
shop.
stay in.
They
I
stay,
mean, some of those things occur successfully in some of the most stringent, like, historic districts in Manhattan and Brooklyn and places
I
like
get
that.
it. You
Yep.
could turn in one of the stables into a coffee and music.
Well, we're not on the stables yet.
No, I'm on free range.
Okay, how about,
Okay, services, general.
Nope. Don't see any reason to have any of them.
Right, not in that
Wait.
location, not in that location.
right, I would think daycare. You got people there that are, if you have families living in the area, you're gonna need daycare.
In an existing building?
But there are new buildings in this zone, too.
we'll put it in.
In an existing building,
What's wrong with
which means
putting,
E and F.
why not?
Hold on.
Okay.
Does residential zoning allow childcare facilities?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
So it seems like it's logical, and you could easily carve out a place in E and F to do
Okay.
it. And that would be actually an awesome place to do it, in my opinion,
Okay.
but on one voice.
Stipulate in existing building?
Daycare allowed.
I'm not sure you have to stipulate an existing building.
So just
Again,
leave-
you can
just leave it
stipulate that
in.
it's not a standalone. That's what you can stipulate. If that's your fear,
That's what
like,
I meant.
focus on what the
That's what I
the
meant.
actual concern is, and then code to it,
Right.
instead of just eliminating it.
So not standalone?
Yes.
Right.
The rest are gone
I
Yeah.
don't know, bed and breakfast?
B
in
and B
that zone.
in our,
In NR zone.
No?
I don't think so. It's pretty small.
Yeah.
You got E and F in there, and there's only enough room for, well,
I think you could do it in the central zone.
What is a personal services,
Nail salon?
pardon?
Nail salon?
Okay.
Beauty
So
parlor,
nail salon,
barber,
facial place,
barber.
Barber.
okay. Cosmetologist,
all right, so are the rest out in that zone?
Yeah.
Right. So we
Yes,
should-
no?
Yes, they're out.
yes.
So we should go to the first page, so the agricultural are out. The industry and processing are all out.
What happened to the ones below?
Did I forget some?
Just eliminating
Oh,
those?
the transportation communication.
Oh, I took them out, unless anybody disagrees.
Nope,
And
wanted to make sure.
industry and processing is out. Recreation, education, and public assembly.
Okay.
Marnie, we can't hear you when you're talking. to-
Oh, sorry. I'm on recreation, education, and public assembly.
The question with public assembly is, with any of these more dense neighborhoods, wouldn't it be nice to have some places for public assembly? And you can limit the
Not,
size.
public assembly is different than, well,
It's not.
it's not resident assembly.
So, and you can, again, you can stipulate how big it is and what it's for.
I know this is gonna kill Marnie, but equestrian facility?
It's not going to work there.
No, well, you could, you might be able to put in ponies,
No,
little
Minis.
ones, midget.
not at that, not at that density, no.
No,
How about the
we're teasing.
fitness facility?
Conference and convention facility? I don't think so.
No.
No.
That creates a pulse of traffic that you don't want.
Yeah, okay. Commercial recreation facility? No, I don't think so.
What about
Hold on.
fitness center?
Oh, that's what I'm going down
Okay,
next.
oh, that's right, that's near,
Fitness, health facility
yes, leave it in,
in the building.
In the
yes.
building, yeah.
Library, museum, art gallery. I don't think so, because that's a
No.
Well-
traffic issue, right?
Well, maybe, maybe not. Again, you can stipulate.
Well, how would you stipulate?
Well, you can say no, but I
Want your opinion?
okay. I mean, I come from a community where there are many, many art galleries and art studios in the oddest places on, in Gloucester and Rockport. And
You stipulate it.
what's that?
How would you stipulate it?
You could stipulate it in that you could limit its size, you could limit that it's in a building, it's not a standalone.
Okay, not standalone. How about
Again, what's great is when you hit these things and you immediately say no, what's useful to do is kind of state to yourself, what's your worst fear? Say your worst fear, then code to your worst fear. Get rid of the worst fear in the code, instead of just saying no. That's all.
My worst fear is we'll be here until midnight.
Right, let's go.
Eating facility, public or private?
I don't think I'd exclude it.
I'd say,
Should be.
Well, sometimes people like to have like a room that they can
No,
have
no,
a
I get-
party or.
Yeah, exactly.
not standalone, right?
Yeah,
Right.
Park, playground.
if you're gonna do families, yes.
I think you want to,
Yeah.
Yes.
well, you want to allow that. School, public or private? I don't
Well-
think so.
There is one there.
Well, it's a
Not in the
residential
dormitory.
facility, they're not doing
I'm joking.
education in there.
I'm joking.
All right. School, specialized education and training? I don't think so. Sports and active recreation facility?
Yeah, I think yes.
Isn't that
If you have families,
not standalone? Right?
Right.
Yeah, you can limit the size and you can put it in a building. Same with the one below it.
Right,
Okay,
not standalone for the studio either,
correct.
Right.
that said?
okay.
Part of the coding of these small, relatively small buildings is you're not going to get the 30,000 square foot sports facility.
Exactly, it won't fit in the
Won't
code.
fit in.
Did we eliminate the two categories above, agriculture and industry and processing?
Yes,
I just want to know.
we did. We eliminated those.
So why don't we do the stable zone now? And why don't we start with agricultural,
Wait a minute, where are we now?
the stable zone, Pilgrim Hall zone? SR/C,
Thank you.
S-RC, so agriculture,
Hold on. Okay, SRC. Well, I would vote for all of the same ones we already did.
so just keep the same?
I would.
Well, actually, with, I think.
Are there any things you would add?
Yeah,
I think definitely what we've already done makes sense.
Well, you would, certainly, you want the building reuse, but none of the things that we checked as, that's why we left a coffee shop, because it could go in the stables.
Right.
Housing could go in there. I don't think there's anything that we took out.
Right.
A gathering space could go in there, a gathering space could go in there, a studio
Art
could go in there,
museum.
art museum, yep.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
I think
all
that
those,
they're all
recreation.
applicable.
How about, but on the residential, would we do like a live-work option unit, which we don't have? And,
Yes.
I mean, the public did mention that in the workshops.
do live-work?
Live work came up in the workshops.
That might work in Pilgrim Hall.
Yeah, and that,
I would support it.
And I think also, I might just add the
Yes.
business, financial, and professional for
Yes, we have to
Pilgrim
be more
Hall, just
flexible.
on the off chance that,
Yeah.
right.
So did live work get in, or,
yes.
okay.
And then the retail would all go in.
Yeah.
What page are you on, please? Oh, okay, never mind, I found it.
Yeah, and then would we do anything like, bed and breakfast in Pillar Mill?
Yeah, let's go
Or
to the
hotel.
services general,
Yeah.
because I think a daycare would work.
Yeah.
Bed and breakfast, I don't know. Would you want to exclude it?
A bed and breakfast doesn't create a lot of traffic. Something that, this is sort of off the subject, but on the subject, something that other townships are starting to do is put some parameters around Airbnb so that people don't buy up entire neighborhoods and turn them into Airbnb, especially destination neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Not that that would happen here, but it's just something you might think about.
Short-term
I was thinking
rentals.
about that.
Yes.
That's in here.
Yeah.
So,
No short-term rentals?
Right.
since this is part of what was the larger central zone, do we want to allow a commercial use, potentially research and development?
No, not if it's, right next to a stream of townhouses and
Yeah, we're in the stables area, I think.
what, I mean.
We're still in the stables.
Yeah, I think that works better.
Right next door.
Yeah, it works better in the CR.
Right,
Area.
middle
Yep,
section.
yep. Now we're seeing why there's 3 sectors.
I'm just saying that they could,
got it.
they
What about
potentially could
vacation
take the
rentals?
east side of the SRC zone.
That's the P&B,
Yeah, there are some weird overlaps.
Right.
Well, that's the
but-
short-term
yeah.
rental, so exclude that or leave it?
I think we exclude the,
Exclude it?
Yeah,
Okay.
but Rick was talking about something else. He was talking about the research and whatnot.
Yeah,
being-
biomedical
Yeah.
research.
And the question would be, do you have enough real estate in CR zone to
Right.
do it? And there's a decent amount of real estate there. There's 6 acres. And the,
There's
here,
eight-
this begs another thing that Emil and I wrestled with, which is we tried to dumb down the lines between sectors and make them more generic. And the more specific you make them in response to the illustrative plans, actually, it gets rid of some of the things that you're just talking about, Rick. Like, what if life science was bursting at the seams in CR? Couldn't it go a little further? And it could have if we hadn't dumbed down these lines. We had better lines
So-
in the previous map that everybody said, get that map out of our site.
Right, I get it. So I'm wondering if in the SRC zone, east of the stables, you could add some language that,
We could, and John Witten even said that you can bend the rules at the boundaries. You just got to name the number of feet into the boundary that you can bend the rules.
name it.
So, Emil, what do you think between SR and CR we could have as a flexible number of feet? Like 150 feet or something?
Well, how big are the actual areas that you're taking from?
It's
One's
more,
6 acres, one's 8.
the CR really wants to go a little further into SR if we made,
Right.
if we made illustrative plan boundaries instead of dumbed down, zone diagrams.
you're asking for a separation between C?
No, I'm going to the John Witten comment that in any boundary between 2 zones,
Oh.
you can state a number of
Oh, I see.
feet
Oh, okay.
where you can make some mush.
You can impinge on that.
Yes, exactly.
Well, we were aiming toward, even eventually, leaving the prospect, you could actually lot this at some point if you ever wanted to get to the detail. You could actually do a lotting on this whole property. We're not going to do that tonight.
But you could do it.
But what I'm getting at, because that typically would be 75 feet as a minimum frontage, so you could use 75 feet as a,
Well, you said 150?
I picked I'm just looking at the map and I just threw something at the wall. Because basically,
Yeah.
if you compared our,
You could do that.
if we compared our older map,
Yeah.
what happened is SR wandered into CR because we were trying to dumb the lines down. We were wrestling and wrestling and wrestling with those lines.
So what's our number, 100 feet?
I'm
You do 100, yeah.
100, yeah.
Okay.
I split
Is
the
that-
baby in half.
Right.
So let's review on the SRC. Are we, let's go to the recreation, educational, and public assembly. Are
Okay.
we going to use the same uses as for the NR or expand them? Because you could have a conference or a convention facility, possibly.
Yeah, I think possibly too.
Yeah,
And
it's
you
really
could have a
multi.
commercial recreation facility, like a small gym, you know, what,
Yeah,
and equestrian facility. You might have an equestrian shop, but I don't think you're going to, even though it was a stable, the problem isn't the use of the building for a stable, it's the turnout for the
Well, and-
horses.
And you're in,
So we'll
use a
take-
generic retail,
Right.
but you
Fitness
probably,
health facility is fine.
yeah. Could be library, museum.
School, public or private, are we going to leave that in? That's scary.
They had a
because it
preschool
could be
there
in-
before.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to leave that in or not, but.
School, public or private, no.
No.
School, no. And then, okay.
So residential, you want to do the,
Yeah,
gonna use the
let's do-
same,
We'll do the same, except the live
live
work.
work.
live work can
Got
be
it.
added to that, yeah.
And then we take out the, all the other things.
Well, the dormitory, which other things we
The
take?
residential care, the second unit or carriage house. And then we
Okay.
already did services and we did retail.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, let's see, well, we maybe should rethink are we going to allow all those services in the SRC, the medical, business, professional? Yeah, why not? It may or may not happen. Building is,
I don't think you want.
Well, they could then do it
Yeah.
anywhere, not just in the
I
stable.
don't think you want medical professional, because that's a high-traffic, appointment-based, people coming and going, you know, like, that could be a dentist's office, it could be chiropractor, could be anything, and they're traveling in and out. That's a lot of traffic.
to take out the medical services?
I think so. You know,
I think the stables area is very tight.
If it were medical research, or, you know, we said,
Yeah, it's
we
tight.
said within the SRC, you could extend the boundary 100 feet, you could include that then in the SRC, potentially. I think this is what Jonathan was getting at, is some kind of biomedical,
In the,
or biomedical life sciences.
it might be in the central one.
Yeah, yeah.
And it could bulge a little bit
That's what I'm
and need a
saying.
little more real estate for parking and things
Right,
like
right.
that.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. And there's room for it to take some of that out of SR.
Right, so
Okay.
that's what.
So leave the office space in, but take the medical out, is that what we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's go to the first page and then do the CRC. And so we're taking out agriculture. And laboratory, medical, analytical,
Yeah, I think you want to leave that in, right?
but not manufacturing. How about media production? Why not? Research and
Well,
development.
leaving laboratory in as a by right use,
No, laboratory,
or just as a just as a,
We haven't determined that yet, we're
Okay.
just,
You know, still might be a
Generic
special permit,
uses.
but it's not, prohibited.
got it.
yeah.
Because
I mean, you're
prohibited is an
planning,
absolute.
you're planning in the NR zone
You can mess
to
with.
have new residential units with 2,000 square feet, and you're going to just hop across that little road, and you're going to have big commercial uses, a biomedical facility, healthcare. You're going to allow all those uses
Well,
right
they would
across
be-
the road
they would
from...
be at,
What?
The square footage would be limited.
Yes.
Right. That could be, you could say that could be a level 1 or 2 special permit.
Right.
In that zone.
Yeah,
And you
I
can
mean,
push
this
it
would
toward
all
the
be
center.
by
You can
special
create
permit.
distance, and there's also topography difference. That level area is in a dent, and what's great is the Pilgrim Hall's up on a plateau. It sort of overlooks that Frisbee field. So if you have distance and then topography difference, there's a nice natural separation, which is, again, how we set these neighborhoods up.
Right.
It's site-specific. And I think with the right distance, again, through special permitting, you could do it.
I mean, the original idea was the whole middle campus was going to be residential, and the upper campus was going to
Well,
be...
that's when we get to the coding.
Right.
How do you differentiate the use that you want to allow by right, if any?
Yeah, so we can make that a heavy lift. You can make the biolabs a heavy lift in the middle.
Right.
And make the residential easy.
Yeah.
And make it easier up top, make the biolabs easier, the life science easier up at the top. That's again the next step in the coding. Where to set the bar high, where to set the bar low.
Right. So let's just run through it. And
Yeah.
I think that this is our first iteration of this. I
This
mean,
is
it
good.
isn't as if we can't come back to this after we start coding and see if there's some problem that makes it almost impossible.
What's great is, as you get further into this, it's going to paint a picture, just like the maps have painted a picture. As you get into the coding and then combine it with the maps, you'll start to see patterns emerge, and you'll either like them or you don't like them, and you'll modify them.
Okay, so should we run down the recreation, education, and
Yep.
public assembly? So,
Are we in CRC?
yes. So any that we want to exclude? The school,
Well, are we, what page are you on there?
the first page.
Okay, so no agriculture or no industry,
No, we decided that we would do industry, the laboratory,
right,
media production.
Right.
research
But
and
not
development.
manufacturing.
Not
So
manufacturing.
you're keeping the industry and processing section.
no. Taking it all out except for biomedical, pharmaceutical research. Okay, then you're into recreation?
Yes.
I don't think you want a commercial recreation, you don't want a conference center, you don't want an equestrian facility, I don't think you want a fitness, health facility unless it's in a building.
Right.
Library, museum, art gallery, not standalone.
Right,
Meeting,
those are not standalone.
Huh?
Yeah, not standalone in the meeting facility.
meeting
probably is
facility,
one.
public or private, not standalone. Park or playground, leave in. School, public or private, no. School, specialized education, no. Sports, activity, and recreation facility, not standalone. Studio art, dance, martial arts, music, not standalone. Makes sense?
Yep.
Right, so,
And
so
the trail
would
will
you,
be in?
somebody help me here. Did we eliminate commercial recreation facility,
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes.
conference convention facility,
Yes.
yes.
equestrian
Equestrian, yes.
facility?
Yes,
But we left fitness and health facility?
yes.
But just not a standalone
Right.
on any of those.
Right.
And then the two school options we took out.
We actually need to put the retreat
Why are we allowing
house-
all those uses right across from the
Separate
street from
use.
residential areas?
It's in the,
The CRC, right, or here?
it's
Yep.
in the heritage landscape, the Mandel House.
Because they
We
would
have to
be,
add
they
that.
would
Gotta add
be,
that.
they would be in buildings that were built. In other words, if it's a two-story building and somebody wanted to put in an amenity for a, small meeting space for the building occupants, or,
So not standalone. I guess.
it's not standalone.
None of this is
None of
standalone.
those were standalone in the
Yeah.
recreation.
Okay, now we could try to, if we're ambitious, let's see.
Wait, do
It's-
we need to go through anything else? on
Did
that?
we get it? Oh,
we done
oh,
on
I'm
all
sorry,
that?
we're not done.
Okay,
Residential,
All of the above except life work unit,
and the,
residential accessory, or,
no, and the, oh, well,
Right.
we're going, the residential care.
basically the same as we did for NR, is that, would that be?
Well, no, this is a little different deal, because if you want assisted living, you need to,
Oh, correct.
you need to think about this here.
oh, yeah, you're
So
right.
there's a
No, you're
pause
right.
there
Yeah,
to think
the
about it.
residential above.
So you gotta leave them in. Okay, so Marnie, did you get that?
So
resident-
we have mixed use, residential, with residential component is okay. No accessory use or structure, but all the other, well,
The two residential care ones.
Yeah, so you're right, all the following,
but not the second unit or carriage house.
Correct.
I don't think so. Because there's nothing in CR.
And transitional and supportive care would be okay.
Yeah.
What about the mixed use with residential component? Yeah, think about the little town green there, where you might have
I think, yeah,
Mixed
we put
use,
that
I
in,
mean-
I think we put that
That's
in.
on the ground, that's in.
That's in.
We left that one in.
The only thing that are out is the live work,
Okay.
the residential accessory, and the second unit. or
So why
carriage
is live
house.
work out of that area?
Should it be in?
I think so.
Okay, put it in.
I think it,
And it's compatible with like your
Okay.
idea of in-building
yeah,
mixed use, in-building,
Right.
yeah.
And how about the business financial professional? ATM, no, yes?
Well, you might want to leave the medical services extended care, because that could be part of the
assisted living.
assisted living.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
And again, you can you could code, how extensive it is. That it's for the residents only.
Office
It's not an
business
outpatient
service,
thing.
yes. Office professional.
Yeah.
And retail, yes?
I'd do the restaurant, cafe, shop,
Yeah.
but it can't be standalone.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Would you
Same.
would you be able to do neighborhood market if it wasn't standalone? Am I pushing the boundary?
I think you
Yeah.
are. The neighbor, I could tell you the neighbors would not be happy.
Okay.
But if you put a little
Just
market
testing.
in the building.
That's what I'm saying,
right,
in the
then
building.
that works.
No? Okay, just testing. Trying to create a little vital, little community here. But,
No,
okay,
I get it.
okay. I mean, what's fun, I think, is as you do this, you can start to imagine your way into a really interesting and rich sort of community fabric here.
So, services general, childcare, or adult,
Yeah,
I think you would leave that in, because daycare could be part of the assisted living facility. It's
Right, for
certainly
your workers or
for-
something, yeah.
And they could have childcare.
Yeah, again, not standalone.
Yeah, exactly.
How about the lodging?
I would
Not
ta- I
the
would not want
short-term
that.
rentals, not the vacation rentals, but how about a hotel?
Well, again, that can, if there's any conferences or activities in that creates pulses of traffic that you can't control. So you just have to think about that. If you have a hotel, are you allowing conferences there, big gatherings in a certain time frame? That would bring in lots of cars.
Yeah, nobody's building a hotel there, though.
Right.
But I'm just saying you need to think about these things, that's all.
No, I get it.
Should we eliminate
How about
that?
how about the bed and breakfast option?
I don't think so. If you've got the commercial,
Marnie, what did you say? Sorry.
I guess I was asking about the bed and breakfast, but I don't think so, actually.
Perfect.
Yeah, I wouldn't want any of that. That stuff is all pretty much better off in a standalone kind of place. You need parking, you need a lot of extra stuff there.
So
Sounds better for the
transportation,
retreat house
communication,
option
infrastructure
anyways.
is out. Prohibited uses,
Yeah, so the transportation prohibited uses are out, yep.
Okay, how about the Browns Hill? Should we tackle that?
oh God, I think that's gonna get a little hairy, but,
I don't think I think it's easy, but
okay,
you give it a try.
Let's give it a try.
Talk about what?
let's go for it.
We
Want a
did lose
vineyard
somebody.
up
Do we
there?
want to wait for Emil to come back? Here he comes.
Do we want a vineyard up there?
I'm sorry, what?
Again?
I said, do we
Vineyard.
want a vineyard up there?
Uh, Emil,
We doing
on
the
the
top
upper
of the-
campus.
We're in- yeah, Browns
allowing
Hill.
On the top of the
Industrial,
hill.
Industrial?
yeah,
Um,
We're up in
engine
Upper
casting.
Yeah, yeah, Browns Hill. Yep, top.
Okay.
So laboratory, medical, analytical,
Oh, can we stop at the, start at the top?
oh, that was agriculture, I thought we left that off.
Okay, so we're done with that.
Yeah, so now we're at industry and
Processing.
processing.
You can't allow that.
Well,
The residential area.
so I think certainly laboratory, medical, analytical, media production, research and development.
So I have a stupid question. If we had life science, and part of that life science required a greenhouse to grow specimens of some sort,
Yeah, let's add
does,
agriculture back.
does the prohibiting agriculture mess with that?
No,
Sounds like a stupid question, but
I don't think so.
I don't know, I think that's
Opinions on that?
borderline.
I mean, our greenhouse doesn't count as agriculture, well, agricultural use.
What was that, Pat?
again, it might be a stupid question, but I'm just trying to
Well,
dot i's, cross t's.
If it was a marijuana growing facility and they were
prohibited.
doing research, they might need a greenhouse, but we've already prohibited that, so.
Understood. Okay.
All right, so
Are
do
we
we,
prohibiting agricultural uses?
Well, I think what we're saying is, if somebody needed a greenhouse, that's not agriculture.
I don't see any harm in putting it in there because I don't think it's gonna happen. But I mean, if someone wanted to have a little private
My-
garden,
well, yeah, I wouldn't worry about it,
Fine.
because I can't imagine planning board going, oh, sorry, you can't do that.
Well, we just need to watch that, if it's not in there, it's a prohibited use, so that's,
put it in
John
there.
John Witten said if it's not in there, it's a prohibited
I'll
use.
put it in there. I
And
mean,
so if there's a prohibited use, is that something that they can come to the planning
You
board?
can't
Oh,
grant a
it
special
has-
permit
Okay,
for it, it's prohibited,
okay,
period.
prohibited. Okay,
So
got
you just
it.
need to watch that, because somebody
Yeah.
could appeal it, and then you have nothing to stand on.
so in terms of industry and processing, everything's
I
okay
mean, I'll make
except,
this a little more complicated, because at the top, there was a key to use, permitted, permitted by request, or not allowed. So we're just saying,
So the
Yes or
agricultural
no?
one
For now,
could be-
we're not getting
We're
that
just saying
granular
yes or
yet.
no.
Yeah,
But
we're
it
just,
could be permitted by use.
yeah,
yeah.
For the agriculture up at the top of the hill.
yeah.
so we can make another round.
Correct.
Right.
So do we
It's
want,
just not prohibited.
so,
Correct.
And later, we can make
It's
them,
allowed in residential
yeah,
zoning.
yeah, you can put a greenhouse in
All
the
right,
back here.
so now we're on recreation and education.
Right. We're taking out, let's just, the equestrian facility comes out. What else? Schools?
uh,
Again, you need to watch that for rush hour, traffic,
Right,
pickup, drop off,
yep.
unless you limit its size.
so the sports and active recreation would be not a standalone facility, it could be in the building.
Yeah, and then again, you might, it's again your traffic management. If it was in a big building and it was accommodated a lot of people and you have lots of people coming at rush hour, is that okay? That's all.
Employees only.
You could do,
Well, I don't know whether, well, like a sports and active recreation facility, that, if someone elected to tear down one of these buildings, they could put in a new big sports complex.
that's why you have to think about that, and
Right,
that has
so I don't
and that
think-
has a rush hour traffic factor, before and after work. if you care, you can limit its size, or you can say, I don't care about that traffic. I'm not saying don't do it, I'm just saying think about it.
Yeah, that might have to have some kind of a special thing, but it could be,
It could be the
it wouldn't
permit
necessarily, well, it could
by
be.
request.
It could be standalone.
It could be standalone, and you just got to figure out, is the traffic okay? I'm not saying don't do it, you just have to think about it.
Well, I'm saying not standalone, you want it in a building to service.
Well, see, on the top of the hill.
That's what we're saying.
Does,
It's a good
do you guys have a
possibility.
recreation facility?
Yeah, it's within an existing facility.
Yeah.
Within one of
But it's
their-
just for employees.
And do you see heavy traffic usage of people coming in and out to use it after work?
Part of the campus already.
Huh?
It's not a public,
I know, that's what I'm saying. I'm trying to say that this isn't gonna generate a lot of traffic because people are either using it on their work hours or after work.
Right.
yeah, I agree. I don't know, there's not a reason to prohibit this as a
I
use.
think you could have
You could even have a standalone.
something like a
Yeah,
YMCA.
Yeah.
There could be a YMCA up there with indoor squash courts.
You
wouldn't want YMCA
that's
up there.
public use.
You know, get
want
more
that up
classy,
there.
get a life.
They would
Have you
have to,
ever-
they would have to build like a significant, like 25, 30,000 square foot facility to make it. You want a YMCA at the top of the hill, you're gonna be shot. I can guarantee you, go to town meeting, you will be shot.
In the residential zoning, it's board of selectmen.
I don't know, my niece lives near a really beautiful YMCA. It's brick with like
Yeah.
atriums in it.
Let's come off the clouds now.
We're talking.
The question is,
traffic.
do you want to prohibit it or just make it a heavy lift for a special permit?
Heavy lift.
Yeah.
No,
And,
don't even.
You don't want to,
Don't
I
even
mean,
go there.
The seminary has the oddest collection of buildings up there. And their only value, other than being torn down, is if you get some use that happens to fit.
Right.
So the library, for example, would be perfect for a museum. So you might not think, but you don't want to prohibit it. You
Right.
might say, okay, well, of course, we'd like to make sure that we have a little oversight on this, but some of these uses would in fact fit into a couple of the buildings they have there. And, at the end of the day, they might be offered, several $1 million to convert it into whatever, and that'll be the only way they can make any money with those, other than tearing them down.
I support that expansiveness of permitting.
I think you have to be, and I mean, some of them, unfortunately, like a library, museum, or art gallery, would be perfect use for that library, but it would generate some traffic. Not a lot, but it would generate.
It's not that big.
Right,
Yeah.
agreed.
Yeah.
So can we keep them in and we can just make the permitting,
I
has to
think
have
you
a traffic
make
study.
the permitting tight. Yeah.
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 Good.
And how about the commercial recreation and the conference
Yeah.
convention? We're gonna leave those in.
Sure.
Yes.
So the only thing we're excluding
Is,
are the equestrian facility and the schools.
okay.
Okay.
What, in school?
Fitness and health.
So are we making the?
I would exclude fitness and health. Fitness and health is a heavy traffic. People come to a fitness center for 30 minutes and they leave and they have huge turnover.
And so I think what we said is for fitness and health facility in the building.
Not
It's
standalone.
not a-
Ancillary to.
So like if you have a 55
larger
plus,
uses.
yeah, that they could use.
All
they
right,
could have-
all right.
Yep.
Yeah, it's in the
And,
building.
and again, you can
Entity.
have that as a special permit and make it as heavy lift as you want and do traffic studies, whatever you want.
Don't even, why add complexity where you don't need to? You put the recreation facility in the building, end of story. There's no recreation facility being built up there. It would be an awful use of the space.
Okay, onward. Residential.
I think
I think
everything
you pretty much
goes up,
have-
everything goes up there for residential.
Well, which should we exclude for the top of the hill? That's a better one. Should we exclude anything.
Dormitory conversion.
Well, residential care, accessory use, things that,
Well, residential care,
Rentals.
it assisted living
What would give
works,
them that central
works at the top of the hill.
campus?
Yeah, you should leave that in, definitely.
Yeah.
all right.
So that would be the second unit carriage house would be out.
Probably.
How about the mixed use with residential component, leave it in?
Might as well.
Yep.
Live, work, okay.
Yeah.
Home occupation,
Mm-hmm.
1 and 2 family.
Yeah,
How
this
we
is,
doing? Right.
It's all,
probably isn't going to work up there.
Not gonna work, but should we exclude it?
no, we don't need to exclude it.
No.
Yeah. And then the business financial, ATM, yes or no?
Actually, that might be a major, what's the matter, Rick? A lot of people use ATMs.
That's why we don't want it there.
Well, yeah, but they're not gonna go all the way up the hill
That's
to
for
get the ATM.
people,
It's for the
you know,
people that live there.
who, might,
You could have Life Science could have their own ATM,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
mean,
for their
we're
own,
talking
But-
again,
but not an
I think a
ATM
bank.
kiosk.
we're not talking a bank.
No.
so how about medical services? Are we leaving them?
They need to stay there if you're gonna have assisted
Right.
living up there.
Yeah.
Possibility, yeah.
Okay.
And they already have a coffee shop restaurant up there, so I'm assuming retail we'd leave.
Yeah, you would, the retail had been specified not standalone.
Did we have the retail and the central one?
In the central, we had just a restaurant, cafe,
Where are we now?
coffee shop.
We're
Not the
going to
market.
daycare.
Not
A standalone.
No to all the rest of the stuff under services?
Yeah.
Okay, but if you do, okay, I'm just thinking, if you have, this might go back to the central campus too. If you have like an adult, the residential, you may wanna have, they may wanna have like a hair cutting place in that residential facility. You know, in
Yeah.
in the central campus,
Yep,
they may wanna have like a barber shop. I'm just thinking of like,
But that would be for the
Residents.
residents
yeah,
only.
that would be
That's not
included.
retail.
It wouldn't be,
Yeah, that's not something
Yeah.
that you would.
not
And you,
separate,
you,
okay.
and you can't regulate that. They can do whatever they want in the
I just wanna make
building.
sure that we covered it if we need to.
Yeah,
Got
you
it.
can't get haircuts in this building.
okay.
The state
So-
regulates those things for the,
Perfect.
the-
I
the,
didn't know that.
um,
Great.
So with
State has a lot
respect
of
to
regulations
buildings
around
A and B, that's really all residential.
Yeah, there's
And,
no work, new work being done there, except.
yeah,
renovation.
and so then the only other things that,
Is, we did.
the Mandel House,
Yeah.
well, the retreat house,
and also the gatehouse is an outlier.
right.
Oh, yeah.
So should we run through them real quickly?
Yeah,
No agriculture for the retreat house. I don't think any industry and processing. And the same would be said for the gatehouse.
yeah.
Right.
And then, commercial recreation facility for either conference, well, no, but for the retreat house convention facility,
Possibly, I'm thinking
Yeah.
it could be a wedding venue, so I don't know
Right.
what that would fit under.
What page are you
fitness
on now?
health facility, no. Library, museum, art gallery, why
I think with
not?
the, can we
Why
go
not?
back to the fitness? I'm thinking yes, if you turn it into like a bed and breakfast, you might wanna have a fitness facility for the people
But that would be
using.
part of
Or
that,
internal.
Okay.
Meeting facility, public
Yeah.
or private, yes.
Yes. Playground,
I don't
probably-
think this-
Probably not.
What, the playground, no. School, no.
Well, it's, no, no school.
Sports, no.
No.
Studio, martial arts, no. No. And I did the same for the gatehouse on
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Okay,
Residential?
it could be condos.
Yeah, that's quite likely, actually.
And the gatehouse could be condos, too.
How
Yep,
many square feet is the gatehouse?
that's not that big.
2,500 or something?
Yeah.
Cerritos, I guess 3,000.
And the gatehouse could be a dwelling, a one or two family dwelling, one family dwelling, whatever.
No home occupation, no live work,
No.
no mixed use. Residential and then
Could it be
all the other-
residential care in that building?
I doubt it. You know, what Barry Abramson said with respect to any of these kinds of facilities for the elderly, they have so many requirements
Right,
for
it's better-
wheelchairs and
right.
bathrooms.
You'd have to
and-
rebuild that building.
Yeah, got it.
So I don't think we have any of the services, business and financial, no.
Would you allow,
Oh, office.
would you allow
Office,
office?
yes,
Office,
yes.
Because it would
yes.
make a decent,
And same with the gatehouse, it could be professional offices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thinking maybe a restaurant at the retreat house?
So
coffee shop.
neighborhood
No
market,
parking. Is the gatehouse?
no, she
But not
said the retreat house.
at the retreat house.
restaurant,
There is actually parking enough there for a small restaurant.
definitely a restaurant in the retreat house.
At the retreat house,
Right,
yes.
on that
No,
part.
no.
They're not standalone.
So the question is,
You could do the restaurant cafe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
Especially if you
so
did
that's a yes in the retreat house?
yes.
There's
but
enough
not the
parking for it.
gatehouse, Yes.
making progress. Services general. So not a daycare, I don't think either
Right.
is a candidate for, but bed and breakfast for sure
both.
on the retreat house. How about the gatehouse?
Gatehouse has 0 parking.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
They
right.
don't even
yeah.
have parking on site for the
Right.
person that lives there.
Yeah,
They park on the grass.
True.
lodging, hotel, small hotel.
Yeah.
No short-term rentals for either. I don't see personal services
No.
either.
Nope.
And, Are we done?
We didn't do A and B. You know,
Oh.
the SD.
Right.
Um,
Well, so those are just residential.
You're saying if they were to take them down.
Yes,
Oh, if they would take down A and B.
yes. You kind of need to do that.
Right.
Can't hear you, kind of need to do what?
If dormitories A and B were taken down, you kind of need to say what's permitted that you can put back there. What uses can you put back there?
The other one I want to be clear about is the heritage landscape.
Yep, you need to do
Because
that.
that's a zone.
Yep,
And
Yep.
you need to,
and you should be able to put parks or outdoor gathering, outdoor gathering spaces, play structures, whatever.
that is a zone, that should have its own.
Yes, yes, but A and B should have some definition to it.
Yep.
And we don't have to do it now, but we have to do it sometime. Because it'd be nice to leave time, now that we've felt this as a process, it'd be great to talk about what the trajectory is from here to the finish line and how that fits with the proposed special
Town meeting.
town meeting.
Right. Well, let me just, before we get to that, and I think that's going to be an important topic of conversation, and we're really pushing the envelope time-wise. Do we have consensus that, on the approach we're taking with respect to, as of right, with respect to the illustrative plans? And those illustrative plans could, theoretically be given a little more definition to address some of Bill's points possibly.
Sure.
But I think the illustrative plans with the as of right, subject to site plan review, is a go. I think the reuse of all the existing structure is as of right with site plan review. That's a go. And then new construction is subject to a special permit, and we can discuss, not necessarily tonight, and we could even get language from John Witten, typical examples of site plan review, light, or, you know, traditional.
Special permit, you mean?
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, I misspoke, special permit.
Yep.
So if that's the approach that we take, I can proceed to keep playing with the draft overlay district that I've done, which I provided everyone with an outline.
I actually want to go into that in a little more detail, but not tonight, especially as it relates to the upper campus.
Right,
There's a lot to do on that document.
In terms of by right and special permit, because Emil and Jonathan actually drew in some differentiation, taking off the two wings and putting in some space up there. So I'm thinking if we want them to be reused but reconfigured, we might want to consider,
that would be an illustrative plan.
well, I'd want to consider potential small expansion or added square footage in those buildings if it's by right to encourage their reuse. I don't want to get into the maps, but both Jonathan.
Right, I think I might have indicated that in my memo, that there was a to be determined additional square footage with
Yeah, yeah.
respect to that
So I want to talk about that as by right. Because it would be nice if you could reuse those buildings by reconfiguring them.
Right.
So,
And I think you did some nice drawings with respect to that.
Yeah.
Taking the wings
Yeah.
off and
Yeah.
whatnot, so.
And that fits into the illustrative plan
That fits into
concept.
the construct that we're talking about.
Yep.
It would be an illustrative plan.
yeah, and I think it also would be worth talking about in the, and I forget what SRC, my mind's gone now, but the
Right.
central campus is certain uses, you might consider a certain level of density. And for example, let's take our senior housing bylaw, we allow up to 4 units. And I don't know if we can do that by right, you know, for a minimum number of units, anything over that special permit. If we can construct the code tightly enough so that you can, the size, dimensions, look of the buildings, just as a way to encourage and say, okay, we're open to this, but with certain constraints by right and conditions. But if you want a higher level of density or different construct, then you need a special permit. I just think it's worth having that conversation.
Having that conversation, well,
Yeah, it's good to use a by right as an incentive
Right,
to get them to do the right thing.
right,
'Cause
And-
you're not always going to get the right thing.
right. Well, that's what I'm thinking is,
Yeah.
and you obviously have experience doing that, so I think it's worth a discussion. Because we want to make this as attractive as possible, because we're doing a good job in terms of setting up specific zones, specific uses in those zones with landscape, I want to say, not barriers, but what's the right one?
Buffer.
Buffers. You know, so, and Jonathan keeps saying this, is, you know, you've got these little areas and you want to make them like neighborhoods and you want to have a certain feel to this. Well, can we do that at a minimum level by right? So people say, oh, yeah, okay, so this does look like I can do
well,
something.
you might be onto something,
Yeah.
because, you know, in the commercial overlay district, their design guidelines,
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
separate document. We could actually, if time wasn't such a constraint, we could produce something just pertinent to that with some
I-
pictures, like of the boulder
We are actually,
showing.
we're working on those sort of things. I was working on some design standards that grew out of the shaking your head. I was working on some design standards that grew out of the illustrative plans that would encourage developers to look at the illustrative plans and not necessarily slavishly copy them, but understand the why. You know, the why are the roads where they are? Why are the green spaces where they are? Now, have at it. Use those principles, understand those principles, and run with it, and do something even better.
Right, but the other thing is maybe show some pictures.
Yeah, absolutely.
that,
There's so many different ways.
That actually.
It's like priming the pump.
Incorporate all those principles.
Yes, it's
which-
priming the pump, and then they can have even more flexibility, and it's a really sort of easy sell to the planning board because they've captured all the principles. So I've been working on distilling those principles into things that can be incorporated either into descriptions of why the illustrative plans are the way they are, or it can even be incorporated into performance standards within the code.
Right. And one last piece of this puzzle, and then we're going to talk about our timing, is I wanted to dispel the notion that site plan review was really onerous. And Patrick, if you could, 3 or 4 sentences pertinent to that, just to inform our, Pat Norton, who isn't necessarily familiar with it, and Beth, and it's pertinent because we're going to have 2 site plan reviews at our next meeting. If you could just say a word or 2 about that to allay any concerns that site plan review in conjunction with as-of-right development would be an onerous impediment.
Site plan review is intended to
Microphone?
be.
Microphone.
Site plan review is intended to be a very rudimentary approach to review of projects. What it typically does is it evaluates whether or not a full application has been rendered, which is not difficult to do. The other elements are, is it safe? Does it meet the thresholds of fire safety, public access safety, those kinds of things? So it's not an onerous review. It's very focused on the rudimentary elements of site plan functions. Visibility, is it dangerous? Is it safe and amenable for public use?
Right, and particularly where this development will unfold over time, I mean, it's important, even with as-of-right development, to assess the safety aspects and then perhaps parking and lighting and the standards are set forth in 10.6 and they could also be adjusted accordingly. But it's really to make sure that the site works well together and there are no really safety issues or issues with respect to light pollution or traffic. Those are usually the issues that come up. So I just wanted to touch on that very lightly.
And can I just add one other thing?
Sure.
Quickly? It also encourages a dialogue between the applicant and the board, a cooperative one, because I think it just helps the process, because the applicant knows that in the end, the application cannot be refused unless there's, it can't be unreasonable conditions that make it uneconomic.
Right,
So-
and my understanding is an application would only be denied if it were incomplete.
Yeah, I
Or
mean.
there was something about it that couldn't be conditioned.
Right, or there was just something really onerous about it that
Right.
was blatantly, the board just couldn't handle it.
Right, so, yes, it's not to be viewed as an impediment, but actually something that will promote the cohesiveness of the project. So with all that said, I'm sure you received the email indicating that the special town meeting is scheduled, I think now for June 28th. And I know that, from my understanding is there is a need for a special town meeting, not specifically with respect to this overlay district, but with respect to some funding for town hall that will expire at the end of June. So that is the reason for scheduling of the special town meeting at that time. But the question that I have for members is it realistic, is it feasible for us to think that we can get this job done? And not by the end of June, but it would have to be, I think, no later than mid-May. And
Are we also going to do
listed the number of-
stormwater at that town meeting?
No, that would be the fall.
That'd be the fall.
I listed the number of meetings that we have, and so we have 3 meetings before our meetings in June.
And then we have to have public hearings.
Well, the public hearings would have to be in May, and where we are, we have Bill, I'm sorry, John Witten's draft. I have a draft, but it's so far from complete.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have the building standards yet, and whatever we do, we have to then go through all the other bylaws and make sure that the new overlay district bylaw is referenced where it needs to be referenced. And then we have to look at other sections, like the senior housing bylaw. If we were to adopt some of its provisions, we would have to then go through and make sure that any development on the seminary site excluded provisions of the senior housing bylaw. So the senior housing bylaw has a cap on the number of units, that would have to be excluded. But we would have to be very, very careful going through all the other bylaws to make sure that we weren't inadvertently making some profound mistake that would render the usefulness of the overlay district questionable or require us to go to town meeting in the fall in any event. So you might sense from my tone, my hesitancy to make any commitment to a June 28th date. I think we have a lot of work to do, and I know Jonathan and Emil have been working really hard, and speaking personally, I've committed a fair amount of work to this already, and I didn't think when I joined the planning board that I would have not a half-time job, but maybe a 3/4 job. I don't know. There's a lot of balls in the air here, and so I want to hear from everyone else. I think we can always come back to this at our next meeting and the next meeting, and if we have some epiphanies on some of the outstanding issues that we have to address, that's great. We need to hear from the seminary. I haven't forgotten you, Dr. Barnes. I'm sure there are butters that want to weigh in, but until we have some more concrete information, it's I want to hear from people, but we don't have anything ready for prime time at the end of this meeting.
Yeah,
Speak.
honestly, be ashamed to go this far and walk away with a half-baked product, which I think would happen
Right.
if that's,
Then we're probably pushing this off till the fall.
yeah, I think that's the only reasonable.
I think there's no reason to not continue running at this as hard as we can, which we have been doing.
Right.
So there's no reason to slack off.
Right.
And just, push, but to expect to reach that milestone with an end result that's well put together is unrealistic, at best.
Mr. Mitchell?
I think I'll echo what Jonathan said, and if we don't reach that mark, then the town meeting on the 28th will be a perfect opportunity to preview what's coming.
Good idea.
We should be
Yes.
90% complete by then.
well, maybe not 90%, but we'll have a nice framework to look at.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think more
Nice framework to look
conversations
at.
is better to get it through.
right,
All right, 70%.
right. And
We'll have a
and
good
really,
presentation.
Yeah.
I can report that Joe Demilovitz has, and the seminary have offered to meet with the planning board or a subset of the planning board to have a working session to review some of the concerns that the seminary might have. And I think that once we get maybe one or two steps further along, it would be helpful to meet with them and fully explain to them what we've done and answer all their questions and listen to their concerns and adjust our thinking if that's appropriate. So the dialogue has to continue, but our work is, closing in on at least some broad outlines of where we're going to go, and I think we did accomplish some things tonight. And, we can synthesize some of your ideas about more as-of-right uses and how that might all come together. So, any other comments?
There was one public comment or question.
sure, please.
This was much earlier on, and I noticed they're still on the call, so.
Oh, yes. If anybody wants to make any remarks, this is the opportunity, because the planning board at 10:15 is getting tired. I can.
Oh, I'm invigorated.
We can tell.
So,
Are you some kind of liar?
excuse the frivolity, but does anyone on Zoom want to ask any questions or make any comments?
There's one comment, one question here, and then Ken just raised his hand, too.
Okay, please, what's that?
Question was, when you have a moment, can you please say more about Browns Hill and the considerations around impact to Vista at the top of the hill?
We're very much aware of the scenic vistas, and we do want to protect them as much as possible.
And they're included in the preferences that the
Yes.
planning board has adopted.
Yes.
Good one. All right, and Mr. Barnes?
Dr. Barnes?
Yes, again, thank you very much for all the hard work. I know Rick was joking when he said he feels invigorated. Well, I actually think you should feel invigorated. A tremendous amount of work was done tonight, and I think we've moved the ball way down the field. And so I would, again, reiterate the fact that I would love to have a working group with myself and with Myrwin and whomever you decide, Emil, Jonathan, whatever, a small working group to see if we can dot some of these I's and cross some of these T's, because I don't think we're very far apart. And I know that everybody is working flat out. And I agree with Jonathan, let's keep that June 28th date there. Let's keep working toward it. And we're all grown-ups. If we get to a point where we think we just can't get it over the line in the condition it needs to be, then that's what will happen. But I would love to see us keep that focus and see if we can continue to tick these boxes, because I'm telling you, we're really close from our perspective.
Okay, well,
Thank
thank you for that.
I have one other question before we finish.
Sure.
Is there a reason why now we wouldn't allow people to come to our meetings? Because I know it still says it's in person for members and staff and then remote for other people. So I didn't know if we would ever change that to allow people who might want to be here in person.
Right. Do you have any news on that front?
They changed,
Patrick?
I looked it up. So
So-
it got extended until the end of March 2025. I just looked it up during the meeting.
Oh,
It's the
really?
remote meetings. We
To
could
March
still-
2025?
Correct.
Wow.
So, but I know we could still invite the public to come if they wanted. I didn't know if we were doing it because it was winter, or that was just a thought.
Well, in part, we did it because with our other special permit matter, that the number of people who were likely to attend would
Right.
exceed the capacity of this room.
Right.
And that.
It was just a thought, so I just didn't know.
At that time, there was still
yeah.
community spread and.
Correct. Anyways, that's just something to think about, I think, down the line, if we want to open it back up in
Yeah.
person.
I think when we get to the point of public hearings, we probably should.
Yeah. I wish we had a larger space.
Could we get a larger space for those meetings?
I wonder if the
High school
seminary might let us
auditorium?
use some
Well,
space.
I don't
I
know.
wouldn't worry about it. I mean, the abutters are gonna be the ones that are gonna be most interested in this, and typically you might get 20 people.
Anyways,
It's-
Well, yeah, again, we can have this conversation that.
I just wanted to put the little
Next
seed out
week.
there. Okay.
I think the only conversation I want to hear starts with "I move."
I move that we adjourn.
Do I have a second? Okay, when I call your name, please indicate whether you assent to the motion. Jonathan?
This is to adjourn?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Oh, and again, thank you, Richard, for all your service, and
You're
Pat,
welcome, thank you.
you're going to be in the hot seat next week. Just kidding. So Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Beth Herr,
Beth, her eye.
Rick Mitchell,
Rick Mitchell, aye.
Richard Boroff,
Richard Boroff, aye.
and Marnie Crouch, aye.
Okay, been nice, folks.